Evening and welcome to the August 18th meeting of the Town Council of Los Gatos. Thank you for being here. Before I get started with our agenda and instructions, let me ask you all to please silence your devices. Very much appreciate it. Even though you've got the greatest ringtone in the world, we probably all don't want to hear it. First thing we'll do is call roll.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Marcia Jensen.
Here. And we're going to then start with what we usually do, our Pledge of Allegiance. And I would love to invite Anjali Vaida, and I want to get your name right. Come on up. Okay, Anjali just started 7th grade at Fisher 2 days ago, right, Anjali? And so far she likes her classes. And I had to ask her, because it's a little program of mine, how does she get to school? She walks, so she's getting the candy. Yay, Anjali. You're a fantastic example, and thank you very much for doing that. She loves reading, drawing, singing, traveling, and science, history, and math. She volunteers to help teachers set up class for the day. And she loves art, and she volunteers at a place by Whole Foods called Drawn to Art so that she can help people with their artwork. She's a 7th grader, and she loves acrylic painting, and she loves to paint animals. So I asked her, well, do you have a pet? Yes, she has her standard poodle, Skipper. Skipper hasn't sat for a portrait yet, but Anjali is hoping for that. So, Anjali, thank you very much for being here, and she's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Anjali. Let's give her a hand. Thanks again, Anjali, and one more round of applause for her. Now it's my pleasure to continue a tradition that was started by Councilman Steve Leonardis, which recognizes small business in town who have contributed to the town over a number of years, which are valued and treasured in our town. Most of us have visited and recognized them, and we like to take the time to give them a proclamation and just give them our thanks and recognition. So I'd like to invite Farzin Monshi and his son Ferris up to the podium. And Mr. Monshi now owns T-Bird's Pizza. T-Bird's Pizza, yes, see? I only have to say T-Bird's Pizza and you get applause, but I have a proclamation for you, but where's my pizza? Okay, all right. So T-Bird's Pizza opened in Los Gatos in 1986, a year after I moved in, and fortunately it was in walking distance to my house. So we had many fine pizza from you, both takeout and enjoyed it there. T-Bird's Pizza has been a great tradition for sports teams, youngsters, families, and whoever wants to eat good pizza in Los Gatos for many years, and have done a lot of great things for the community. And one of the things they've done is employ the youth of our community. So thank you for that. And we've got an employee that's here, and he's being very upset that I'm recognizing him, Zach, here in the front row. We just, on behalf of the council and the town of Los Gatos, Mr. Monshi and T-Bird's Pizza, thank you very much for all you've done. And here you go. And I think that Ferris would like to say a few words.
Oh, yes. Oh, gee, I'm so unprepared. Wish I had written something.
Oh, here it is. On behalf of everyone at T-Bird's Pizza, we would like to thank Mayor Jensen and the City Council for selecting our restaurant for the Small Business Big Applause Award. We are truly honored to accept this award because to us, the fact that it exists is a testament to the deep-rooted history of Los Gatos, its close-knit community, and the discerning tastes of its members. Through all of the change and progress that this city continues to thrive in, it has never lost its charm. Los Gatos has a character and a soul, something which many suburbanized cities seem to lose over time. The people here recognize the value of our city, the same way we recognize the value of our products. Not by the mere age of our city, but by its achievement within that time. Not by the price of our products, but by what they are actually worth. We couldn't imagine a better home for T-Bird's Pizza, as Los Gatos' standards mirror our own. And we couldn't be more proud to serve up the best pizza in the Bay Area to a city and a people that champions value, authenticity, and quality. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monchi and Son, and T-Bird's Pizza. And we're all hoping that we can hire Ferris Monchi as our writer because he, as the Vice Mayor said, he does a pretty good job, better than some of us sometimes. Closed session report, Mr. Schultz.
Yes, good evening. I have a few dates to report. On August 12th, August 13th, and before tonight's meeting, council met in closed session to discuss the appointment of the town manager. As to this item, no action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you. Now it's time on our agenda for what we call council matters. This is our opportunity to report to each other and to you and to those of you who may be watching us on TV about what actions that we have taken or meetings we've attended on behalf of the town of Los Gatos since last we met in these chambers. So, Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I have three things to report on. The first was I attended the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District's legislators' lunch at the Piketty Winery. There was several council members from the area and a few of the state legislators there. One thing of note was the staff asked me to send, the Mid-Penn staff asked me to send a thank you back to Laurel for her working with them on the priority conservation area. So they made a note of finding me and telling me, so you must have done a good job on that. Second item is Cities Association meeting last Thursday. The Legislative Committee met and decided to oppose AB 1110 by Ting, which is greenhouse gas emissions disclosure on the grounds that it would make community choice more difficult. Then after the Legislative Committee, the General Board met, and we had several presentations, one by the Santa Clara County Fire, and they talked a lot about their regionalization initiatives, they called it. Things were such as chief collaboration, resource sharing, so forth. So basically how, they can share between the towns and be more efficient with the resources they have. We also had a presentation by the Santa Clara County New Development Water Efficiency Task Force, which is working on a model ordinance for new developments that towns might wish to enact when they get it done. There was also a transportation funding coalition that met, or that presented to us. Some of the highlights were the letting us know, I guess, that we were not our cities are not the only ones with crumbling roads. That it's a problem all across the state. They were basically saying at the current funding levels, a quarter of the local roads and streets will be in failed condition by 2024 if more funding is not found. They talked about the causes of it is, gas taxes have not been increased in 20 years, not indexed to inflation, and obviously more electric cars that are wearing the roads out without paying gas taxes. We also discussed there is a proposal for a consolidation of part of ABAG to be moved into MTC. They wanted to move basically the RENA planners from ABAG into MTC so that the land use planning and transportation planning would be done in the same organization. The cities association's members voiced a lot of concerns about if we pulled apart ABAG, whether they would still be able to do a lot of the other services that they supply to the town, such as insurance, and there's many other services beyond determining our RENA allotment. And then the third item was, I guess the backstory is I'm president of the Los Gatos Morning Rotary, and I invited our state senator to speak at the Rotary, and questions came up that are related to our town about traffic, cut-through traffic, and so forth. And Senator Bell specifically said that he chairs the Transportation Budget Committee at the state level, and Caltrans reports to him, and he would be happy to help us negotiate with Caltrans, which is, I know, been one of our Parks and Public Works challenges to get Caltrans to work with us to figure out ways to cut back on cut-through traffic. But without being asked, he volunteered to say, yes, you know, I can help you negotiate with Caltrans. So there's a note for the staff. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Thursday, along with the mayor and Mr. Leonardis, I was in these chambers for the Art in the Council Chambers reception, honoring those artists who did the art that you see on the walls surrounding you. And then on Monday morning, I was back in the council chambers for the promotional ceremony for 2 police officers.
Thank you. Following up on the Caltrans and transportation, I've been doing a fair amount of, or attempting to do a fair amount of media outreach and discussion regarding our cut-through traffic issues. Have been meeting with staff and others. I know that staff has been having meetings with, among others, Caltrans. I did want to report that I've been in contact with Assemblyman Evan Lowe's office, again, a state representative for this district, to request his assistance in reaching out to Caltrans for letting us use electronic signboards and Caltrans right-of-ways on the freeways so that we can give information, real-time information, to drivers who are on the freeway before they get to town about what conditions they might find downtown. And I know that we've also, the town has tried to be in discussions, or at least preliminary discussions, with some of the traffic apps, including Waze, to try to do something to help us ameliorate those issues. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. On Wednesday, August 12th, I chaired the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting, and the primary order of business was our strategic plan objectives for 2015 and 2016.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
On August 13th, the ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, had a regional meeting. On the agenda was the possibility of MTC taking over the regional housing allocation numbers, and basically it was an opportunity for them to say, what do you cities need to help us? And so they're actively listening, and that's an opportunity for us as a town to share our concerns that we have received, at least with regards to the RENA numbers. August 17th, Director Morley and I were at San Jose Water Company's briefing on drought measures and actions and activities that they are doing to continue with drought mitigation. Specific information was transmitted to the council. And yesterday in these chambers, I was at the tail end of the promotion ceremony for the 2 officers promoted.
And I should also say, I don't want to leave them out, I did participate in the orientation of our members of our new members of our youth commission, and it's always a pleasure to deal with those people in our community who are stepping up early to volunteer. They have great ideas, they have great enthusiasm, and I see Captain D'Antonio sitting there. Thank you to Captain D'Antonio for taking the time to put together, and also Jen Calloway to put together, and Heidi Murphy, orientation for those members of the Youth Commission to let them know how our town works and to get them started to giving us great ideas. So that was also something that I had the pleasure of attending. With that, Mr. White, Manager Matters.
Yes, as we did at the last meeting, we'd like to just give you an oral update on the cut-through traffic issue. I've been extraordinarily pleased with the efforts of the Public Works Department and Police Department in making a number of efforts to mitigate some of the traffic on the residential streets, in particular with the notion of trying to keep as much as possible the traffic on major streets, but preferably on the freeway. In the future, and the future is every weekend for us until Labor Day, we do anticipate keeping some streets closed, of trying some different signal timing approaches, and to also continue using some signs. The real key would really fall to comments made by Council Member Rennie and the Mayor, which relates to Caltrans and Waze, to have any real lasting effect if we can. It's going to depend on Waze not giving residential streets as a way to cut through to get on 17, and for Caltrans to do whatever they can, including what was mentioned in terms of signage that we could at least put on the freeway, and preferably, in addition, maybe they could do some as well. We are incurring costs, as I mentioned to you the last time, for some overtime and for rental of signs, and then we have had a traffic consultant who's out formulating recommendations to bring back on September 1st. With that, I'd like to ask Matt and then Michael just to give you a couple of brief comments. And at the same time, thinking of Michael, I wanted to also acknowledge that Matt Frisbee, our Chief of Police, is back from several weeks of surgery, and it's nice to have him back in the room tonight. Matt?
Thank you. From a Parks and Public Works perspective, to start out by noticing that what we found over the last couple of weeks, that it's very resource intensive in terms of staff time and getting folks out there on the weekends and moving about and observing everything and folding that into our daily workload and trying to stay fresh during the week as well. So my thanks to the department and to the police department as well for the extra efforts that those folks are putting out and getting out and about in the weekends. We've been focusing on short-term mitigation. Some of the things that you see that are very obvious are the signs and the adjustments in the intersections. We look towards a midterm relief, the Labor Day efforts being that target where we're able to put some additional things in place that we've found over the last several weeks and in the next upcoming weeks that will help us with some relief on that, what we expect to be a big weekend in terms of traffic. And that will line us up, I think, with the things that we've learned over time for some long-term solutions. With that, it's important to acknowledge that solving the problem completely is probably not feasible. Our hope is to relieve the pressure and to provide some solutions that keep the cars to a manageable level. Some of the specific items that we've seen and some of the lessons learned, the closure of streets that we did this last weekend in Almond Grove, from an engineering perspective, helped to redirect folks back down to North Santa Cruz or straight on down to Highway 9 and 17 intersection or on-ramp, and move traffic onto the freeways where we want them through a more direct route. That was a successful change. Again, we're doing some trial and error things here, and they're pilot programs, and we'll adjust along the way, but they will certainly educate us as we look towards permanent solutions in the future. We've also been behind the scenes playing with signal timing. One of the interesting things that our traffic consultant found in his preliminary analysis that he's provided to us is that the travel times from Highway 85 and Highway 17 are pretty close to the same, staying on the freeway versus jumping off and coming through town. The difference is that the initial stretch coming through town, the Winchester or the Los Gatos Boulevard areas, are a lot quicker. And it's not until the folks reach downtown that it really bogs down, and then the curves, if you will, the length of time that it takes to get from one place to the other start to equal out a little bit. So we'll want to experiment a little bit in the coming weeks with forcing those times to be a little bit more equal at the front end, and we'll do that through some additional signal timing adjustments. There's some concern along the way that we have to pay attention to making sure that town residents and those that are patronizing our town businesses are also able to get to their destinations. So we'll watch it carefully and make sure that we minimize the impact overall. And again, this is a trial period, and we'll want to see what these impacts are going to be, and we'll have the larger discussion at a later point on whether they work for us or whether the impacts are too great. And I think, again, one of the things we're seeing is a large impact or some impact with every change that we make. And then quickly on the ways in the Caltrans, we have a follow-up conversation with Caltrans tomorrow. I'm optimistic that they'll have a partnership with us to have some measures in place for Labor Day, if not before. Ways I've provided specific local residential streets for them to deprioritize. They've said that they will work on that. They haven't yet implemented this anywhere in their database, so this is a new thing for them, and I've asked them to commit to Labor Day as well, and as soon as I hear back from them on that, I'll be sure and pass that word along. The police department's been great support and have made great observations and been a super presence on the weekends, and I think Captain D'Antonio will provide some of that information.
Thank you. So from the police department's perspective, the last few weekends, what we've done is we've tried to stay more fluid. Initially, we had officers out and really focused on enforcement. Then the second weekend, we looked at putting our officers actually in intersections to do traffic control. So this third weekend, because we were really doing something that we had never done before, we had our officers come in on overtime, and we had our motor officer come in. We also had members of command staff come in so we could monitor. And the reason why we stayed fluid was really specifically for closing off Tate and Massaul. So what we did was not allow folks to turn onto Tate or Massaul from Highway 9. And we really wanted to see how that affected the neighborhoods. There was a concern that even if we would do this as a pilot program, that there was the potential that it would really impact the members of the community that live in Almond Grove. So what we did is we placed officers in that area really just to observe and to see if it was really helping at all. What we found was that it did help, and we did see far less traffic backing up on Tate. However, some of the ripple effects we found from that were we started to get some complaints that traffic was starting to use Ridgecrest off Highway 9 to cut back through back towards Main Street. So the other thing that was interesting, that even with our cone pattern set up for blocking Highway 9 and Tate and Massaul, we also had a ripple effect of folks using some of the private property lots cutting through the Shell station and other businesses. So we worked with those business owners that day, had discussions with them, and on their own accord, they put some cones out to try to help mitigate that. The other thing we did is over on Main Street and North Santa Cruz, one of the weekends what we did was we actually directed traffic there. And the reason for that is that we're seeing a backup on Main Street. Sometimes the backup will go all the way to College. So what we wanted to do is see if we were able to alleviate that traffic. So what we did this weekend is blocked the east-west crosswalk on the south side of the intersection. And what that gave us an opportunity to do to see if folks were able to turn left or southbound onto South Santa Cruz and alleviate some of that backup. And we saw some relief there as well. So we're going to continue to do the pilot programs. We're going to continue to stay flexible. One of the things that was important for us to do was to have, again, Lieutenant Tata was out there Saturday. I went out Sunday to really look and see what was working and what wasn't, so we could report back to the town manager, to Public Works, and also to the council to see what kind of impacts are we making? Are they positive? Are they negative? Because we really do want to stay fluid and to be creative as we move towards the Labor Day weekend.
So we welcome feedback, and on September 1st, we'll have a formal agenda item with a written report and recommendations for you.
Any comments or questions from the council at this time? Thank you very much, all who reported. Now is the time in our agenda where we consider our consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that are publicly noticed. They've had staff reports prepared, and they are on our calendar because there has been discussion about them, and there's been a conclusion, which may or may not be correct, that they are relatively non-controversial, that they could be adopted in a single motion. That being said, however, if there's anyone, our consent calendar now consists of 7 items. And if there's anyone on the council that wishes to pull one of those items, let me know. Any item on our consent calendar can also be pulled by any member of the audience. So I'm looking to see if there's anyone that wants to pull any item. Okay, I don't see anyone. We'll look for a motion on the consent calendar. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Move to approve consent items 1 through 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Rennie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Before we move on to the remainder of our agenda, let me give all of you just a couple of, I want to call it instructions, but just some comments on how we will conduct the meeting tonight or any other meeting. Tonight's a little bit unusual. We do have a period on our agenda where we allow for verbal communications. Our verbal communications is a time when you can talk about something that is not on our agenda. Item number 9 tonight is our strategic goals, so I'm going to do a little show and tell. And we have 3 pages of strategic goals that cover police, infrastructure, parks, water, downtown, retail, closing streets, festivals, town flowers, any number of items almost that you could imagine have been proposed as a strategic goal by the council, are an existing strategic goal that's to be reevaluated, or are proposed by the staff. Those all come under item 9. So if you have something that comes under those strategic goals, you would address it under item 9, strategic goals. If you have something that is somehow not contained in our strategic goals, then your verbal communications is your time to address us for 3 minutes on that item. I would ask you all to remember that there may be somebody that spoke about something that you're also interested in. Consider whether or not that person has captured what you'd like to say and whether you need to add to it or whether you are satisfied with what that has been. If you are speaking on behalf of a group and want that group to, or you want the council to recognize that there are others who support your position who aren't necessarily going to speak, you can ask them to stand and indicate that they support your position. Please don't clap, boo, hiss, applaud, whatever it might be, because we're, as the council, trying to pay careful attention to what everyone says and make sure that everyone is heard. That's our goal, is to make sure that all of you have an opportunity to be heard fairly. So I would ask you all to consider that. The other thing I'd ask is that when you do speak, please speak to the council, because after all, you're here to give us your input. Please don't turn around and speak to someone in the audience or someone else. It makes it easier for us. You'll get 3 minutes to talk. Council members may have questions for you. Please don't run back to your seat before you find out if there's questions. You'll see lights when you come up. There's a green one that says you're fine. There's a yellow one that says you have 30 seconds left. And there's a red one that says that I will politely tell you that your time is up. And if I do get to that point, I'd really ask that you stop speaking and consider the fact that there's others who might want to talk. If you do want to talk to us on any item, there are these buff-colored cards that are in the seat backs in front of you. If you would fill one out, it gives me the opportunity to know who I'm calling on. It gives you a chance to queue up, and it makes you part of our record so that we know everyone who's talked to us. So given that, I first am going to say that I have 2 people who have given me cards on item number 3. Item number 3 was part of the consent agenda, and it was passed as part of that. So we're not going to have a public hearing on that. We'll note that you are here to talk about it, but item 3 was adopted as part of our consent agenda, so we will not be taking speakers on that item. Now is the time for verbal communications. And despite the caveat that I gave you about everything in the world is on our agenda tonight, I do have 3 cards for verbal communications. And they are Beverly Lazoff, come on up if I call your name.
You'll have to excuse me because I'm not exactly sure what the process is, but I did want to make an announcement regarding the issue of the suicide prevention issue that
That's
I know.
actually already been adopted.
I know, but could I just make an announcement in terms of, I'm a board officer on the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Santa Clara County, and we provide education for people, and it is such a serious issue, obviously, and I just wanted to record that I have information for people.
Okay, that's great. If you'd like to give that to our clerk, we will make that available to those people that would like it. And if you want to, while you're up here, if you've got a web address or some other reference that you want to provide, then you're welcome to do that.
Actually, NAMI is, as I said, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, www.namisantaclara.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Walker.
Good evening. I just wanted to share a follow-up on 3 items. The Bachman Park water situation, we still don't have water on at least a 20 to 25-foot area. I know you've tried to adjust the sprinklers, but I'm beginning to wonder if we have a sprinkler design problem. So maybe we should go back to whoever installed them in the first place and ask them why they don't cover that area. I can stand in the middle. There's no water happening when the sprinklers are on. Secondly, I just wanted to express as a resident that I'm concerned about our trip and fall hazard policy. I was at the Park Commission meeting on August the 4th, or 3rd, I guess, when we had a resident who came to speak about our park trip and fall hazards who fell over the rocks in Town Plaza. I did not see any signs go up, no cones, no yellow tape, to warn any citizens that this might be a trip and fall hazard. I've spoken about the gopher holes in Bachman Park. We've been informed that there's been at least 2 broken legs. I'm concerned that we could post a sign and tell residents that there's trip and fall hazards to be aware that are hidden under the grass. And third, I just wanted to express as a resident of the Almond Grove or Bachman Park area that it was very hard to get home last weekend with both Tate and Masole closed. We had to go up to Ridgecrest or down Santa Cruz Avenue, which is also very crowded. Thank you.
Councilman Leonardis. Ms. Walker, you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. It's just a question for staff.
Ms. Walker, you can be seated.
The hazard that Ms. Walker described regarding, I think it's the fountain area in our plaza, I know has been of concern to us for a good number of years, and I know we've tried to go out there and rework it and do some different things. But it was my understanding that somebody had fallen out there last week again and hurt themselves pretty bad. I guess the question becomes, at what point do we decide we should just maybe remove those rocks and let it be done? I mean, I think it's one of those things that we've had enough experience, we've tried different things, but people still seem to be falling over those, and I don't know if they would really be missed by a good part of the community.
Thank you, Councilmember. We're working on that now. We'll have our pricing in place this week and be able to put a contract together to have those rocks removed.
Thank you.
Before I call on the final verbal communication, I did get 2 more cards, Thomas Galley and Chris Miller, about item 3. It's been adopted. So that's a matter that's been that was on our agenda, that was adopted as part of our consent calendar. So I'm not inclined to invite verbal communication on something that's been adopted and is on our consent calendar. So I'm not going to call on you. Okay, do not from the seat, Mr. Miller. Come on up and do it from the podium, and it better be something that's good.
I just want to thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pravetti, for taking the time to meet earlier in the spring. Thank you, Councilmember Leonardis, for putting the item on the agenda. And thank you, Council, for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Jonathan Knowles. I'm dying to see how this is not going to be about the police.
It has nothing to do with strategic
I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the Los Gatos Montesino Police Foundation. There seems to be some misconceptions about it. I just wanted to remind you that we have been around for 25 years plus in our community, raised over right around $500,000 for things like youth scholarships for our youth commission, our K-9 program, special investigative tools for our detective bureau, anti-drinking and driving program, specialty equipment of all kinds, specialized training, the victim services unit, the peer support unit, the new resident outreach program, DARE, the evidence team trailer, the disaster aid response team SUV and trailer, our volunteer police reserve officers, the ice cream and pizza coupon program, Kids with the Chief, Adopt a Cop, Cops and Kids, the Los Gatos Children's Christmas Holiday Parade, and even our police pipes. These are things that simply would not have been funded when they were, had it not been for the residents of Los Gatos who decided to give of what they had to help make our place a little better. Some of them are here tonight that have been extremely generous to us. People like David Stonecipher and Larry Arzi. Billy from Billy's Boston Chowder, I saw him here as well. We've been doing good for a long time. We have never endorsed a candidate before. There's some strange rumors going around that we had. As a matter of fact, we're careful not to even have photographs taken with any of our board members when the officers are in uniforms that could be used for something inappropriate or even illegal. And we've never suggested anything operational as far as the police department goes. The way we work is the police department comes to us with a list and says, here's the things that we think that we want, and we look at it and say, well, here's the things on your list that we would be happy to fund. And that's because we're more interested in funding things like victim support unit and peer support than we are in funding bullets for their guns. We know that they're going to get that. You're going to put that into their budget. But we're talking about doing something that takes it a step above. Our foundation is nationally recognized for best practices and has been for several years now by the National Police Foundation and other police foundations across the country. So we look forward to continuing to serve our community and make Los Gatos the special place it is through providing public safety that is really second to none, for sure here in Santa Clara County and even most places in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. John Shepherdson.
Yes, Madam Mayor. First, I wanted to thank Mr. Knowles and the Police Foundation for all of the good work that they have done on behalf of the town over the years. I kind of take issue with terms of public safety that we're second to none, and that we're not into. This is. And that is, it relates to the Almond Grove area and the reason why I'm speaking, and that is a lady mentioned here about some kind of warning signs about trip and fall. Well, we know that in 2011, a report sanctioned by this town indicated that there was trip and fall liability throughout the Almond Grove area. And so that was 4 years ago. And in fact, I got a call today from somebody mentioning that they had fallen, and I heard from other stories, other story to that effect. So my thought is perhaps the council might want to consider some kind of warning signs in the Almond Grove area that there is a trip and fall liability. And in terms of public safety, I think it's very important because, for example, in Halloween, we have a flood of children walking on those streets at night, and people bring their children to Los Gatos because they feel it's safe. And so if you walk those streets, as I know you all have, there is that trip and fall liability. So that's why I echo this lady's comments with respect to the Almond Grove, and perhaps consider some kind of warning signs for the very issue of public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherdson. That's all the verbal communications cards I have. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is number 8, Veterans Foundation update regarding a proposed Veterans Memorial at the Los Gatos Civic Center. I will say that I have only 2 cards. Neither one of them represents the Veterans Foundation. So I'm assuming there's somebody from the Veterans Foundation that wishes to speak to us. So if I could get a card filled out, that would be appreciated. Ms. Gilmore.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the Town Manager. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to present to the Council with an update from the Veterans Foundation regarding a proposed Veterans Memorial at the Los Gatos Civic Center. On January 20th of this year, the Town Council directed the Veterans Foundation to move forward with a finalized design for a trellis on the Civic Center Plaza with the focal point and a design for a memorial in the Redwood Grove with statuary should the veterans decide to move forward on either of these locations. Since January, the Veterans Foundation has met weekly to review the direction that the council gave to the veterans and has worked closely with town staff to identify a location that they would like to bring forward to council for their consideration. The location that they have chosen is the Redwood Grove area, which is one of the two locations that the council directed the veterans to review in January. Tonight, the veterans are asking for council to consider and approve to place a memorial in the Ivy Redwood Grove. The proposed site would also require the approval to allow approximately 500 to 600 square feet of lawn area to be removed and the ivy-covered areas of this location to be considered for some acceptable alternative hardscape. Approval of the site will allow the Veterans Foundation to move forward with the memorial planning. Following the approval of the council, if the council approves this request tonight, the veterans plan to release a request for proposals to obtain more detailed memorial proposals and to review those proposals with the community stakeholder group that involves the veterans and to bring those final proposals back to the council for their review and consideration. Staff's recommendation tonight is that the council accept the update from the Veterans Foundation regarding the placement of this proposed Veterans Memorial within the Ivy Grove with general modification to the current landscaped areas. And as stated in the staff report, that council approval tonight is an approval of the site location and not necessarily an approval of the conceptual or preliminary designs or pre-approval for any final memorial designs. This concludes the presentation, and staff is available to answer your questions.
I do want to underscore that we've been very clear, and I was at 3 of these meetings. The town attorney was at a couple of the meetings as well. And we did have discussions about that location. We did feel that that was worthy to bring to the council so that the veterans could move forward in their planning efforts. And we were also very, very clear that this did not constitute approval of anything that would go on that site, that has to go through a separate process and come back to council for future consideration and approval.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm going to look to the council members for any, what I'm going to call preliminary questions prior to taking public comment. Okay, thank you, Ms. Gilmore. I would love to get a card from you, Mr. Lochner, if you're going to speak. Are you the representative? So is there any member or of the Veterans Foundation who wishes to speak to us tonight regarding this proposal? Okay, I don't see anyone. So I'm going to call Leonard Pacheco.
Good evening, Council. Leonard Pacheco, Los Gatos citizen. I think we've come a long way since those early days of the memorial. I still have some comments to make on the proposal, however. Should the council favor this, not so much the location, but the concept, it should be treated as concept only. And the reason I say that is if you approve the actual layout with dimensions, you're going to be hamstringing the designer. So if you approve it and you like this layout, just approve it as concept only and let the final designer design the space. In addition, in reviewing the selection panel, there's no inclusion of a professional designer, and I wonder why. The selection panel should include a design professional, either an architect, a landscape architect, a recognized sculptor to participate. Those are two things that stick out. Once, if you favor this, just prove it in concept only, but reconsider the panel and include a design professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove, and I just want to say, yay! I can actually see a memorial in these redwoods.
So whoever phone that is, kindly silence it.
Oh, he's
Thank
from
you.
the Veterans Foundation. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I am really excited about the possibility of this moving forward. And that it's not important to have the biggest and the best memorial. It's one that needs to be from the heart. And I think we're going there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Those are the only cards I have on this matter. So, Mr. Stonecipher.
You got my card, Council. The only concern that I have, speaking from the representative from the Arts Commission, of which we have had no counsel on this at all beforehand, so it actually comes from just myself. Looking at this plan where it says new concrete walk, if the new concrete walk is where the old concrete walk was, then I would say this is a yay. But if the new concrete walk has moved into the public lawn area to a significant amount, then I would say that we need to reconsider this carefully. This is the town civic center lawn area is the only large open space area that we have for all kinds of civic affairs, like what we did 2 weeks ago with the Arts, Fiesta de Artes, what we do every week in the summertime for the music in the park, and for, who knows what will be coming up in this growing town. So my concern is that when the commission recommended what we call the Redwood Grove, it was a Redwood Grove as it exists. If this encroaches into the lawn significantly, I think we need to reconsider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonecipher. Let's see, make sure there's no questions. Nope, they're not. Thank you. You're scuttling out of there very quickly. Mr. Shepherdson.
Yes, Madam Mayor. First, I just wanted to thank Mr. Lochner and the group for, and I apologize, I got to face you, but I'm thanking Mr. Lochner and his group for the hundreds or thousands of hours that they put into this project. I'm very grateful for that, and I know a lot of others are. And the second point was perhaps naming the park Veterans Park, something like that.
Questions for Mr. Shepherdson? Thank you. I don't have any other speaker cards on this matter, so I'm going to close the public hearing unless there's someone else who wants to speak. Okay. Ms. Quintana.
Lee Quintana. I'd just like to ask whether staff could indicate on the diagram that's up on the screen where the existing lawn currently ends, and whether, just to get an idea of how much this changes the lawn area.
The walk area is shown there, which doesn't necessarily have to be the final walk area, and the cutout half circle area constitute about 500 600 square feet total of lawn area. The walkway could be moved back into the ivy area. I mean, that's out there for a design person to take to a committee comprised of a representative of the Arts and Cultural Commission, other commissions, as well as some other people that have been recommended on this review body, and then it would have to come back to council for any final determination.
Thank you, Mr. White. And certainly if council members have questions for staff along those lines, they're obviously going to pose that. But Mr. Rennie, before I get to your question, I want to see if there's another speaker, or did you have a question of one of the speakers? Okay. I don't see any other speakers, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And now I'm going to look to council for the questions of staff. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So, Mr. White, a little more clarification on that. I believe that on the right side up there, the concrete does not exist now. There's no walk. On the left side, there is currently a concrete walk. When I looked at it, I assumed that it was the same concrete walk that was there, that we weren't making it any larger. So we'd actually be, if I'm correct, we're adding concrete walk on the right side plus obviously the circle area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The proposal you have before you from the landscape architect would be to extend that walkway, and I believe one of the thoughts behind extending the walkway is to make the memorial location ADA accessible, so that people could access the memorial from multiple points, from the Pageant Street, from the Civic Center main plaza, as well as from the parking lot.
Quick follow-up. And so the width of the sidewalk is 3 feet, 4 feet? 4'6". Thank you.
If any of you have seen My Cousin Vizzy, have you ever seen My Cousin Vinny? So the witness and only the witness. Ms. Gilmore, is it 5 to 6 feet?
I believe that that's an approximate number. That's yes.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Gilmore? Councilwoman Sayoc?
Thank you. So, Ms. Gilmore, one of our attachment, I believe it's attachment 2, it's a draft of a letter that would go to community stakeholders explaining the process. Is this simply draft form for information, or has this gone out?
This is draft for information, so the Veterans Foundation and town staff work together to compose this process, and it is in draft form. So obviously, if the council has recommendations for other groups or organizations to include in the stakeholder process, the town and the veterans would be more than willing to add those people to the list.
Okay. I don't feel the need to specify any more specific representation, but I do want to ask and clarify, this will be a public process, so that those that feel that they would like to weigh in but don't necessarily fit within that criteria, at some point they'll have an opportunity to do so, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I want to thank the Veterans Foundation and staff, because where we were many months ago and where we are now, it's just a huge difference, and it's a difference to the better. So thank you all. With regard to the proposal, and these are just some thoughts, at this juncture, I visited the site, and at this juncture, I would be prepared, if there's a motion down the line, to give some general positive input, but not to touch on anything that gets to design. For example, things that would be acceptable to me would be the Redwood Grove, the Ivy, and what I've just learned is the ADA necessary concrete walk. As far as more specificity on square footage, on that I would prefer to wait for an actual design.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? I have a question. I think that Mr. White, I'm not sure if it was Mr. White or Ms. Gilmore, said that the function of the council that you were looking for, the decision point you were looking for, was for us to accept, quote unquote, the information that the Veterans Memorial has given us and what Veterans Foundation. And then later I heard approve the site. So are you looking for us to say, yes, we accept your report, thank you very much? Or are you looking for us to say, yes, we approve the site as depicted on this schematic? Because my decision would be very different depending on your answer.
I think what we're looking for is for you to approve in general that location for the Veterans Foundation to proceed with its planning efforts.
Okay, let me clarify my question. My follow-up is, I see a schematic that talks about 560 to 600 square feet. I see, and that it encroaches on a lawn area, that it includes perhaps walls, whatever it might be. So I don't know that an approval in general of the area is quite different than an approval of what I'm seeing here.
Yes, well, this particular drawing does not include walls, does not include any particular statues or monuments. That's something that would be subject to design. What we're looking for is that location. Now, if we were to suggest that the Veterans Foundation wasn't looking at encroaching somewhat into the lawn area, then we would be misleading you, because they are looking for some of the lawn area similar to that to be utilized. So we're looking at that location, and we're looking at something that could approach some taking of lawn area.
Okay, other questions or comments? Or Councilwoman Sayok.
Understanding that you're looking for some feedback, I'll go ahead and give some with certain assumptions, and please correct me if some of these assumptions are incorrect. I do approve in theory the concept of the Redwood Grove area. I think that that was one area that the Arts Commission, as well as the council specifically, identified as a positive area. So I think it's great that those suggestions were followed, and that something along those lines, particularly using a landscape architect, I think it changes the feel significantly from what was originally proposed, and I'm quite comfortable with the direction it's heading in. In terms of how much grass being taken away, I think 500 to 600, that's difficult to articulate when you just see a schematic. I am not opposed to grass being taken away. I think we need to actually make sure we understand what significant actually means. I think Mr. Stonis first commented that he would not object. I think we need to clarify what's significant and whether or not are we enlarging the Redwood area, or is it simply just continuing that pathway that already exists? I think those are some gray area that I think can be easily worked out, and as long as we identify what those questions are up front, those are issues that the foundation can move forward when they start their design and when they start meeting with the community stakeholders. But in general, I'm quite comfortable with the location as is presented in this general schematic.
Other comments or questions? I'm not sure, and perhaps Mr. White or Mr. Schultz or Ms. Gilmore can help us on the council. If I look at the recommendation on our staff report, it says, accept the update from the Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation of Los Gatos regarding the placement of a Veterans Memorial. That means to me, thank you very much for your report. We'll see you when you bring back something more specific. And that's quite different from approving a location and a schematic. So I want to make sure that everybody understands precisely what it is that is being requested and precisely what the action would be, because we might just give you feedback and say, thank you, we accept your report with nothing further. Or we may make a motion that says we approve of this location, but we don't approve of the specifics we see, whatever. There could be any number of things. But so I think the council would be helped a lot by exactly what it is that the expectation is. And if it's for us to decide that, we need to know that too.
Well, I think the expectation is the location. There can be changes in any of the configurations up there once they get into a design mode, once they go through reviewing it with the body that they are looking at. What we were attempting to show you was something that was devoid of a number of the additives that they had in an original drawing that showed walls and other features, because we were very clear in saying that that's not something that the council could approve or would approve at this point, that would have to come back in subsequent progress reports and actions between the Veterans Foundation and after they've gone through a review process. So we are looking at that location. If you were to accept the update of the report, it accepts that location.
I would respectfully disagree because I think I'm just accepting the information, but I will look to the council for how they wish to proceed. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I guess I want to make a comment and a suggestion. First, I want to commend the Veterans Foundation for their diligence to keep working at this, to find a memorial that fits into the special nature of Los Gatos. And I particularly like their idea of including all of these other organizations, that they're inclusive and they get, sort of full public comment from all the different sectors of our town, if I can use that word. My thought is, though, there's some question about how much into the grass we want it to go, and I see it's got 12.6 basically from where the path is now. It's cutting 12.6 further into the lawn. It's really tough to tell if 12.6 is the right amount or not. It would be, my suggestion would be, we do story polls so you can see how high a development is. Before this comes back for us, maybe we can have something put on the lawn that we can look at before a council meeting to go out and say, okay, this is how much of the lawn, whatever design they bring forward is going to be taking up, and that, I think, will make it easier. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was having the same issue as I think the mayor was verbalizing, which is I didn't know what staff or the applicant was requesting of us. And I'm still not quite certain, quite frankly. But having said that, I'm going to try a motion, and then we'll see if anybody seconds it or if they amend it. I'm going to move to approve the proposed location in the sense, to the extent that it is in the Redwood Grove, that it is in the Ivy, that it is in the location that is adjacent to what is now New Muse parking lot and a portion of New Muse building, and that it incorporate a concrete walk that accommodates ADA requirements.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor as indicated by the Vice Mayor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilwoman Sayoc. Any discussion on the motion? Questions? Amendments? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you. Which brings us to item number 9. Item number 9 is a discussion of the town council's strategic goals for the years ahead, for 2 years ahead. And what we have in the chart that's currently on the board is a graphic that's indicating what goals we've had in the past. The yellow indicates what's been actually accomplished. They're organized in a way that some council people understand. Some council people, including this one, don't particularly. That is not the entirety of the things that we are set to discuss tonight. If any of you have reviewed our staff report, we have a number of suggestions for goals that have been suggested by members of the council, have been suggested by the staff, are also recurring. Some of those, some of the suggestions we have been made by members of the public and then been adopted by the council. But we have a number of them. We have tried, and we have, as I held up earlier, we have 3 pages of them actually. It's not easy to put them into categories, but they might fall into budgeting or budget review category. They might fall into an infrastructure category. They might fall into a downtown category. What we've asked the council members to do is to just think about 3 or 4 of their high priorities, but that doesn't mean that they can't talk about or are welcome to talk about anything that is on this list. And that goes for members of the public as well, to talk about anything that they want the town to consider to be a goal going forward in the next couple of years. We encourage that. And I have a number of cards for people that want to do that. But first, we're going to get a staff presentation more thoroughly on what we're going about or trying to accomplish tonight. Ms. Pravetti.
Thank you very much. This is a very important discussion for the council to have because it does set the priority for our town activities. Earlier this evening, the council considered the town's work plan in terms of all of the work that the different departments are doing. 80% of our work is day-to-day activities, and then 20% is dedicated to items such as strategic goals. Attachment 1, which is up on the screen, identifies the completed goals in yellow and the white ones that are still in progress as identified in the staff report. Attachment 2 is really the new ideas, and those were ideas that were submitted by all 5 council members as well as by staff. We have a variety. We have these blown up, so as your discussion proceeds, we'll be able to help you monitor which items you'd like to add to the list. There are different ways of organizing these, as the mayor said. We chose to use the same organizational structure, and so that's the way they're broken up in the handout, but you're certainly welcome to consider them in any order. In addition, there are any number of criteria that the council may wish to consider as you go through this. It could be emerging priorities or trends that you see affecting our town. It could be workload, and you may even want to comment on those items that are already underway. You may decide, we really don't need to put staff effort and resources into something that's already started. Let's instead put our attention to emerging needs that need to occur. To the extent we can, we'd love to see what new items you might want to consider for our town. They are maybe up to about 10 or so that we believe we have staff capacity to handle. Again, there may be the ability to switch off or identify trade-offs if there are others that you want to add to the list. To the extent there are priorities within that, that would also give further definition, but I think just getting to a selection would be a terrific success for this evening. We do have department heads and other staff available if you have questions. We tried our best to capture the ideas that were submitted, but individual council members may also wish to elaborate on their own ideas. And this concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. And just before I ask for questions, preliminary questions, again, I'm going to call them, just to make sure that we as council understand those things that are on the chart, the boxes, are not static. They could be removed if council members or public indicates that they feel that they should be removed. They could change. They could be expanded. They could also be retracted to make them smaller, as I understand it. It's a fungible chart that we have going forward, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, any questions that anyone on the council would like to ask of staff before we hear public comment? Okay, I'm going to call the members of the public who filled out cards. And each of you will have 3 minutes, and please make sure that we don't have any questions before you go back and take your seat. Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana. I have just 2 things that I'd like to discuss, except they probably engender larger topics by themselves. During the study session, there were several things that were brought up, and a lot of the discussion was around the cost of implementing the strategies or the work plans. And so my question is, or suggestion is, that one of the strategic goals might be to implement a program in the town, possibly hire a part-time person or find some volunteers who have expertise in searching out grants that would cover some of these topics, and being that person being responsible for applying for grants, possibly providing the money for updating the website, or whether there's money for doing the document digitizing and that type of thing, bike lanes and whatever. I understand there's lots of money out there, but you have to know where it is, and you have to have the expertise to apply for it. So that's one of my comments. And the other comment that I have is has to do with the zoning code and the consistency of the zoning code with our town documents. There have been many documents that have been adopted, and the zoning code has never been changed to be consistent with them. Or there are documents that are inconsistent with one another, or there are inconsistencies within the zoning code itself. And it seems to me that before you can start taking on some of the changes that are on the various workloads and the strategies, that it would be good to have a solid base that to work from, where all those inconsistencies are taken care of first.
Thank you.
That's
Questions? Thank you. Jack Van Naden?
Good evening. My name is Jack Van Naden, 165 Euclid Avenue, and I'm here with just a suggestion on the comparison of costs. There's been a lot of conversation about police costs versus the sheriff's costs, and I've heard one of the measures was the cost per capita. I would recommend against using cost per capita, because cost per capita will take into account mismanagement by any given city. It will take into account different services required by police departments, so it really won't give you an apples-to-apples comparison. The one thing that I would recommend, if that study does go forward, and I would recommend that it does because there's too many questions that have been raised, would be that the cost comparison is the annual salary, or you could do a monthly salary of the Los Gatos Police Department, 40 hours of wages, 40 hours, or 1 week's worth of salary, 1 month's worth of salary, versus what the same positions in the sheriff would be. So you're now comparing salary of the sheriff to salary of the Los Gatos Police. Then I would say if there is a difference based on a percentage, let's say that it's 10% more. Let's assume in this case that the Los Gatos Police are 10% more than the sheriff's office, then you make a decision, is that great enough to take the next step into hiring a consultant? Maybe 10% is too low, so maybe say 15% or 20%, but a percent should be determined ahead of time. So what I'm trying to do is simplify an approach to evaluating whether this whole evaluation of the police costs goes forward with a consultant. $70,000 seems like a lot of money. This seems like a simple solution, and so I brought it up tonight. I did send it to everybody, but Steve said he didn't get it today, and then it did come late from me, so you may not have it yet, but it will be in your email box. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see if there's questions for you. Councilwoman Sayak.
I understand you emailed it to us. Did you also email it to staff so that comparison or methodology that you've mentioned is something that they could look at?
No, I just emailed it to the town council at Los Gatos. Mm-hmm.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Von Naden, where did you come up with the figure of $70,000?
I'd have to go back and look at my notes where that came from, but it was a number that was mentioned as the cost of a consultant. Might be more, might be less, I don't know.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Sean Luca?
Sean Luca, 33 East Main Street, Yogurt and Love. Thank you, Town Council, for taking your time out. I came today to speak about adding to the strategic plan the Parklets Idea Initiative. I've been working with Matt Morley and Parks and Public Works, and frankly came up to answer any questions that you may have, concerns that you may have, and if it's okay to ask to see who here in the audience is in support of or in dissent of the idea. If that's okay.
If they know what it is, you can ask those who are in favor of it to stand up.
Okay. If
A parklet takes, say, for the audience, a parklet takes a parking space on the street, converts it to usually outdoor dining. You may have seen some on Lincoln Avenue in Willow Glen, where parking spots have been essentially blocked off with planters or whatever it might be, and there's infrastructure put in and then tables put in, and that is a parklet. So to the extent that you feel like you know enough about it and you want to stand up and say you're for it, go ahead. There's one. Okay. There you go.
Fantastic. And I basically came up to thank Matt Morley and the gang for working with me and through this process, Town Council as well. If I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Luca? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you, Mr. Luca, for championing. You've been an advocate, a strong advocate for this idea. One question that I haven't been able to do the research. How much do you anticipate it costs to create a parklet? I know there's various designs. You could put plants, you could put, you can make it as fancy as you want.
Absolutely.
What's the range that you're looking at, and how are you envisioning this happening? Is it the proprietor in front would be paying for the specific parklet? Could you just give me your vision for how this were to move forward?
Yes, ma'am. I believe, in speaking with other business owners, is that the business owners that are in front of those parking spaces would be responsible for the build out in an agreed design from the town, something that's ubiquitous and everyone agrees on, and that we would absorb the cost of the build out. We've also discussed ongoing charges, upkeep and maintenance, and those things that the town would charge for, really trying to make this at least a revenue neutral event, if not a revenue generating event for the town. Welcome.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. My question is, how easy is it to remove these? Could we have them on the weekends, but then take them away during the week, or are they too cumbersome for that?
It's a great question. If I were sitting in your chair, I would tell you that it's probably too cumbersome to do on a weekly basis. I would tell you that from a seasonality aspect, a late spring, early fall, have it out there and then remove it. The other side of that, then we have to look at storage, upkeep and maintenance of those type of things. And I think that would involve the town more on those items and how much that costs, those type of aspects. So it's very easily, to put something out, a decking area, the planters and those type of items to protect the pedestrians and the folks sitting in the dining area. Those can be made very easily to be removed. I would probably tell you half a day to set up, half a day to take down. You're welcome.
So, Mr. Luca, I'm going to ask you a question along the same lines.
Yes,
I know it was suggested to you, or there was some discussion between you and staff about possibly engaging in some kind of pilot program where you just put up, I'm going to call them airport or Disneyland ropes.
Yes, ma'am.
With planters in the corners, put some tables out and try it, on a weekend. And that didn't go forward. Can you tell me what the disadvantage, if any, would be to that kind of a test?
The length of time. Honestly, the cost of building it and making it safe from a customer or pedestrian aspect, ADA compliance, making certain that the curb is level with the decking that's out there, it is cost prohibitive versus what I like to say, throwing some lawn chairs and a yellow cone out and seeing how it works out. So my concern is making it a Los Gatos level, environment, the beautification of it, and then making it safe and complying with ADA concerns. Those type of, aspects of the design doesn't feed into something I could throw up in a weekend and look at it for a weekend and see how it looks. It may be something that we put up for a month, but again, when we talk about the costs and associated and who's picking up those costs to build those out, I would imagine, and I'm only speaking for my business, that we would like to see, a return on that some way, somehow, of if we're going to put this cost out, how long is it going to be there? What can we expect from a return on investment?
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Mr. Luca.
Thank you.
John Shepherdson?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Council. So this is a Venn diagram of two options. Left side, the Los Gatos Police Department, the advantages of it. The local officers know the people in town. It's tradition. It's 42% of our budget. On the right side, with the sheriff potentially saving $6 million a year, we can control what we want from them by negotiating that contract on an annual basis. Saratoga and Cupertino, according to SafeWise, are safer communities than Los Gatos. Currently, Saratoga is 5, Cupertino is 22, Los Gatos is not in the top 50. We can rehire the Los Gatos officers into the sheriff can rehire the Los Gatos officers. They have a helicopter, SWAT, dogs, dive team. We could ask to keep Chief Frisbee on as our captain. I think he's really good for the town. And at the bottom here, it's a way to keep our town from escalating up into a city where we're not dependent on large commercial projects to fund town services. And then in the middle is I call it an elegant solution. This is a quote from former Mayor Steve Rice: "Nothing should be set in stone, and it's always good to review expenses and budgets." So a third-party comprehensive review with someone like Management Partners brings us that, and we get to the apples to apples. We can get the efficiencies from the report. We'll get, say it costs $150,000, we will most surely get $150,000 in savings or more. And then we can include it in a survey of the citizens. And if we want to make it broader and make it the entire budget, I can see the benefit of that as well. In terms of the breakdown of the costs, this is information from the staff report. Los Gatos PD, $368 per citizen. Cupertino, $162, the difference, $206. You multiply that by about 30,000, and you get $6 million in annual savings. 20 years, you're talking $125 million. And we can use those monies to attack traffic. Smart traffic lights, Danville-like traffic program, bike lanes, shuttles. The opportunity costs that we're presently experiencing because of this large police budget is hampering our ability to handle this problem. Next issue. I just want to say that in 51 years I've lived in Los Gatos, I have never seen an African-American police officer. I don't know why, but I haven't seen that. Next issue is, it's advocated that we be like Mayberry. And I understand that's sort of community policing. But what does that send? Another message could be sent from that, because Mayberry the main characters are all white.
Mr. Shepherdson, your time is up. Do you have any questions for him? Council? Thank you, Mr. Shepherdson. Sally Reagan?
Thank you. My name is Sally Reagan. I live at 209
And Ms. Reagan, you can pull that microphone down to you. There you
go. My name is Sally Reagan. My husband and I live at 209 Belmont Avenue. We've been residents of Los Gatos for over 40 years. I'm going to speak in relationship to this police issue. I think we have a great police department that understands our town and culture and our unique character. I don't think that the town should conduct a police department fiscal assessment of services if that means considering replacing the police department with the county sheriff. I think that the most valuable thing to our town is our public safety, and it's a great way to spend money, I think. And I also think that the police chief should report to the town manager, as has been customary in the past. And I also think that the Los Gatos Police Foundation should have the discretion to spend the funds that they raise in support of the department. So thank you very much.
See if there's questions for you. Nope, you can have a seat. Thank you. David Weissman. And you can pull that microphone up. There you go.
I ask that the Town Council agendize the following 3 items in the coming year, and I realize there's some overlap between what's already in the work plan. Item 1, revise the hillside fence ordinance. At present, fences on newly constructed hillside properties are regulated if that fence is part of the original A&S. Such fences can be of an open nature, not with chicken wire, to facilitate the movement of animals. This requirement is nicely covered on page 42 of the Hillside Design Standards. But once a hillside house has been built, then it is open season on what can be constructed as long as the fence height is less than 6 feet. Why would anyone have a fence as part of their original A&S submission? Yes, there are a huge number of fences presently in the hillside, and yes, the town probably can't make homeowners remove their current fences, but we could attempt to minimize future damage to our hillside animals by preserving their movement corridors. Plus, there are conflicts within the various codes as to what is permissible with hillside fences. This would not be a big fix and could be accomplished with little effort. What is necessary is direction from the Town Council, and I am volunteering to do a first draft. Only your direction is needed. Number 2, at the May 5th, 2015 Town Council meeting, direction was given to staff to revise the town's current smoking ordinance. After that meeting, I spoke with Jackie Rose and her students on the Youth Council, and they were interested in being part of this effort. I have spoken to staff about this on 2 occasions, and both times they have the fallback position that the town attorney, with his considerable experience in this area in the past, is the ideal point person. In fact, he's appointed as he's designated as the team leader in the work plan. But Rob Schultz already has a full plate. So in conversation with Mr. Schultz, he indicated that turning this project over to the Youth Council, perhaps under my loose supervision, would be a welcome situation. All that is needed is an appropriate motion from this council to get the ball rolling. I suspect that since school is now back in session, we could have a draft before Rob within 6 months. I appreciate that this process would be somewhat out of the box, but please remember that you'll always have the last word. 3, some 6 years ago, I sat down with Trang and Engineering to revise the town's grading ordinance. Then Trang got sick and all efforts stopped. But just a few weeks before she left the town, she reinitiated these efforts. We quickly formed an ad hoc committee of Sandy Decker, Lee Quintana, and myself. We met some 4 times before Trang left. Unfortunately, it now appears that staff, at least from the work plan, is prepared to have 2 drafts submitted. 1 draft from our ad hoc committee and another draft from staff. That just doesn't work.
So Dr. Weissman, you can finish your thought, but then we're going to ask you to wrap up.
It would make more sense to employ the technique that we used recently to devise the town's tree ordinance. Very simply, to concern citizens to sit down with staff and line by line create 1 new document that could then be presented to the committee and then to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Dr. Weissman. Questions? Councilman Remney.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Dr. Weissman, I guess my question is, the Hillside Guidelines already have rules for grading and how much. Why do we need to change the grading ordinance? What's the impotence for this?
Since 1999, I have sent 4 or 5 different letters to staff and the town attorney, and have met with the town attorney going over loopholes that are in the present grading ordinance and lack of enforcement. And I would be happy to sit down with you, Rob, and go through these letters if you would like. One instance is that if you want to grade less than 1,000 square feet, and grading is defining as just clearing vegetation. You don't have to be moving dirt. If you want to grade less than 1,000 square feet of land, you do not require a grading permit. Sounds good, but you could theoretically grade 990 square feet on Monday, 990 square feet on Tuesday. There are no time limits on it. This is one of many loopholes that are in the grading ordinance, and these were recognized by Trang in her revision. It would just be impossible to sit there and have two large documents and expect the Planning Commission or the Town Council to go through item by item and compare the two of them and decide which wording they like the best. It makes sense to come forward with one document.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Dr. Weissman, you mentioned three goals or three strategic goals that council could potentially proceed on, and we have a limited amount of resources. I do appreciate the fact that you had worked on the tree ordinance, and I think your efforts on that should be commended. The two that are near and dear to my heart on your list are the smoking and the hillside fence ordinance. If you had to pick one of three, just because we have such a limited amount of resources in this coming year, with the understanding that maybe in the future we'd have another opportunity to bring another goal forward, which of the three would you prefer?
We can do all three of them because it's not going to cost the town anything. We've got ad hoc committees. We've got people in the community that are interested. The Youth Commission, the Youth Commission is free. I would be happy to supervise them. The fence ordinance is not a big deal to rewrite, and we've already got an ad hoc committee for the grading ordinance. We would come back with final drafts.
So just a follow-up question. So you're offering your time and efforts on all three of these?
Yes.
To make them move forward? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
A question of staff that may lead into a question for Dr. Weissman, if I may. Do we have identified activities for the Youth Commission for the upcoming year?
I'm going to ask Chief Frisbee or Captain D'Antonio since we're... The question is, what's the work plan for the Youth Commission?
We also have some youth commissioners in the audience, if they want to tell us.
We haven't yet established the work plan for the following year going forward.
Okay, and then a follow-up to Dr. Weissman. My understanding is you did help the town with our original smoking ordinance. Having looked at the revisions we anticipate we would like to get to, what's your approximate workload, man hours of, how many hours do you realistically think it would take?
I think it depends on how many youth commissioners we have. I have some very specific ideas. The wheel does not have to be reinvented. We have neighboring towns of Campbell, Palo Alto, Morro Bay, where our attorney was, that have recently revised their smoking ordinances. The Mercury News actually does a fairly good job of covering things that are being done for, in this area nationwide. And I've got these articles. It would be a matter of going to the Youth Council, getting it agendized, getting as many students as would be interested. What a great way to, what a great thing to put on your college application. I think, and when I spoke to the students after they did their vaping presentation, they were enthusiastic about doing this.
Anything else for Dr. Weissman? Thank you very much. Kay Little.
First, I'd like to thank Mayor Jensen and the members of our town council for making time in your lives to serve our town. I've been a Los Gatos homeowner and resident for 45 years, and I'm very aware of the importance of your elected office and the impact of the decisions that you make on our town. Developing proposed strategic goals for the council's consideration is an important part of planning for the future. However, I'm a bit puzzled by 3 items as they relate to our outstanding police department. To suggest we need conflict of interest policies as they relate to fundraising would have a negative effect on the community members who, along with the Police Foundation, raise money to fund services, equipment, and programs for the community. For example, the body cams that were mentioned earlier were funded a few years ago by the foundation. With the chief of police already reporting to the town manager, it seems redundant to ask him to also report to the council. We have excellent leadership in our Los Gatos Police Department. I think we should let the police chief do his job. My fear, and that of many of my friends and fellow residents, is that these policies are the precursor to outsourcing our fine police department.
Thank you, Ms. Little. Are there any questions? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. If I just could offer some clarification on these points. I was the one who suggested these for different reasons, and I think there might be some misunderstanding on these items. Regarding the conflict of interest policy, most police departments have these, and it deals with things such as should your officers operate a bail bonds business on the side, or should your officers perhaps sell medical marijuana in another community. These are things that I think as policy standpoints, I don't think any of our officers are doing these things, but moving forward, I think it's good to have these protections in place so the expectation is set up front to maintain the integrity and the high honor that our officers in Los Gatos currently embrace. As far as the chief reporting to the town council, this is an idea that came to me reading the town manager's contract, and it comes down to dollars and cents. Essentially, and this could change going forward, but in the past it was like the chief of police reports to the town manager, and if the town manager were to commit a crime, that would be a way for him to be excused from his job. And if the chief of police had to investigate or be part of pressing forward with the investigation of his boss, it kind of creates a conflict. So that is the explanation on that. Now, we have 5 people on council here. I don't know if either of these will become adopted. I don't know if these are policy issues, but they were not intended as outsourcing the Los Gatos Police to the sheriffs. These are not what these were intended for. They have deeper reasons, and I'm glad that you brought these points up, and I'm glad I have a chance to clarify those. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Leonardis. Let's see if there's questions for Ms. Little. Thank you very much, ma'am. Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. I'd first like to address one particular proposed goal, which I feel impacts the overall effectiveness of our governance process. Public trust and mutual respect are essential for effective political leadership and efficient government. Democratic governance requires that decision makers be fair, independent, impartial, and accountable. Our town operates under a council-manager form of governance, and as elected officials, elected at large, you're ultimately responsible to the public. So why do we have a proposed goal to reinstate the annual retreats? As you're well aware, I got extremely involved with the Almond Grove Street project about a year ago. I poured through every single video, public document, public record, you name it, could not find anything about certain significant decisions that the town was forging ahead with. The only conclusion I could come to was that they happened in the black hole, these retreats that were done. Retreats that had no minutes, no records. No one would even discuss what went on at the retreats. I just find that it would be impossible to maintain public trust if you reinstate those retreats. And also, there's the Brown Act. Requires that meetings of town council be open and public. So I respectfully request that you take that off of the list. I'd also like to discuss a couple of other proposed strategic goals. Let's talk about baby steps. One of you uses that term a lot. What is wrong with a cost accounting of the $15 million spent a year on our police budget? I'm not using the word outsourcing. I'm not using the word of any other kind of conflict. I'm just saying we have the Fab Five in our finance department. Fabulous people with extremely great credentials that could do a simple cost accounting analysis. Forget all of these theories. Forget about everybody shooting guns or shooting targets with theories about cost per capita, cost per this, or et cetera. Let's just do the facts. Stick to the facts, man. Having the police department chief report to council, I really don't know. We don't have a new town manager yet. This represents 42% of our budget and has a significant impact on the rest of the departments. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. So I would just say hold off on putting that as a goal. And last, I provided you with a desk item on suggesting a strategic goal for transition plans for curb ramps and sidewalks, gutters.
Thank you. We received it. Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Questions for Ms. Dorner? Thank you very much. Oh, were you raising your hand, Councilman Rennie?
Mine's really more for staff.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dorner.
Thank you.
I do have a question about the retreats. Actually, I can't find it on the list here, but the retreats were targeted for staff, or were they targeted for council? And obviously, a council retreat's in the public.
Right. All council meetings with a majority or more have to be noticed under the Brown Act. So what we were looking at was some kind of convening, whether it's a study session or a regular session item, to just go through the work plans of our boards and commissions, so that way we know that they're working on the items that you would like them to work on. We're not suggesting a retreat that would be off-site or somehow not involve the public.
Thank you. Maybe we should just change the name to study session.
Thank you. Or strategic goals. Doug McNeil.
Good evening. Doug McNeil, 17413 Pleasant View Avenue. One of the key points, and I won't go back over points made earlier this evening, but to be succinct, I would just like to make sure that when any evaluation is done of any part of the city or any service, that there's a fair and equitable evaluation of services on both sides. So if you're interested in understanding the police department and understanding the value that's brought to the community, with respect to community policing or big city policing, I would ask that you look fairly at not just what's in the department, but what the department does to influence the community and create the volunteerism that we enjoy here in the town of Los Gatos and Montecito. I personally lived in Cupertino. I lived with the sheriff's department when I grew up, and through my young adult years, I never saw the sense of community involvement that this police department has. And so if you just compare salary to salary, it's very myopic. If you look at the big picture of all the value that's offered up, and what this police department has done in the 18 years I've lived here far exceeds anything I've ever seen in this entire county. So I would ask that when you do an evaluation at every level, you evaluate all of the organizations that Jonathan commented on earlier, and what benefit that brings to a community and creates the sense of community that we all came here as citizens to enjoy. I haven't experienced that. I've lived in 5 different parts of this valley. I've never experienced that until I moved here to Los Gatos. I would also further caution people to evaluate and understand when they look at the police department and its diversity to be very careful how they evaluate our police force in terms of people of color. We actually have an officer of color. He's been with us for 10 years. His name is Derek. And so make sure you understand the department before you come up here to the podium and make comments. Make sure you understand the benefit that this department has created for this community that we all enjoy before you make rash statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Let's see if there's questions for you. There are not. Thank you very much. That is my last card. So I am prepared to close the public hearing unless someone stands up. Ms. Susick.
I thought you had more in your hand. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a formal request for something simple but complex. Council members, both new and old, have faced incredibly divisive issues with weeks and months spent on research, meetings that were contentious and often filled with non-residents. I'm confident that this plea can be achieved by you as you've accomplished so much. Tonight, the strategic goals are under review. I would respectfully submit that you move to the very top of every category, the unification of the town of Los Gatos, and that it become a core value as well. Currently, this is a town divided. We're divided by geography, highways, school districts, town boundaries, east, west, south, and north. Some of the boundaries are outside your control, but others are well within it. And it's imperative that the needs of everyone in Los Gatos be considered and represented for financial and community reasons. Here are some ways to do so. Annexation of all county parcels to create additional tax revenue for the town and unify our town. The staff will need to work with the county to do so. If the council and the staff doesn't find this feasible, then the requirement for volunteers and paid positions within the town must be changed to allow all residents of Los Gatos to be eligible to volunteer or run for public office within the town. There are currently 5 vacant spots on town commissions and boards, with 2 more opening in December on the Planning Commission. There are currently members serving on multiple boards due to lack of applicants and an overall apathy in a community that often feels that those that live in the downtown area, are given preference in all town matters. As we know, the majority of recent and proposed development will affect those north of Highway 9 the greatest. Better application of town services, including waste management and the police department. We now have garbage and recycling trucks crisscrossing town twice a week instead of the previous one day, creating additional noise obsolescence and wear and tear on our roads. The police department and the sheriff's department are continually passing off responsibility or jurisdiction to each other due to boundaries that often divide a street, traffic arteries such as Shannon Road, or major tracks like La Rinconada and Blossom Manor. The budget for the police department may be under review, but that's another issue. This is the concept of unity, one town served by all, and the best use of all our resources. With the difficult issues that we faced and that are proposed, there must be a balance between the problems and our core values, general plan, and town code. So uniting our town, allowing new blood into the volunteer positions, and creating parity amongst the neighborhoods so that we can face our problems together should be the council's top priority for this coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any questions for you. Nope. Thank you very much. So I don't have any cards in my hand. We're hiding under my binder. So if there's someone else who wants to speak, now's the time to do so, or I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay, seeing no one, I am going to close the public hearing. And I think that before we go into our discussion, I'm going to take a break for our council for 10 minutes, and we'll start up again at 9 o'clock. going to ask you to come back, take seats, and we will get organized. We're going to try to resume here. And Mr. Holt, our public participation is done, so if you want to go back to work, you can. Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask people that are standing and talking to wrap up their conversations so that we can do our, excuse me, so I can choke. We're going to start our discussion. And members of the council, what I'm going to suggest is that if any questions of staff specific to any of the items that came up during our public discussion or just in general regarding our staff report, now's the time to ask those questions. So are there questions for staff or members of the department? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question of you or staff. There are a lot of, priorities that are listed on these 3 pages or that we may have on our own. What do you anticipate the process to be this evening going forward?
Right. My anticipation is that I don't want a foreclosed discussion of anything, but as I started out in talking, there's different ways we can organize this. If you look at attachment 2, they're organized into the categories that we have on the chart up there, community character, et cetera, et cetera. I think others break down into infrastructure, downtown, financing, budget analysis, things like that. We did ask members of the council, hopefully you all got that email, to think about your top 3. And what I was thinking about doing, unless I hear protest about it, would be to start in the order on attachment 2, just using the headings that we already have, for example, community character, and ask if council members have one of their priority items in one of those, and if yours overlaps, as I think many of them do, then just go ahead and give us those is sort of how I would anticipate doing it, because I don't think it's not productive or efficient for us to go through this line by line, but I would welcome thoughts on what I'm suggesting. Okay, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So it's my understanding that with staff's ability to accomplish within the next year, we have a finite amount of workload and resources. So the goal is to try to come up with 10 items collectively. So mathematically, that equals 2 each. Now, I don't know how the council is going to vote on each and every one, but I guess I agree with your idea of going through the list item by item and tackling it that way.
So ultimately, I don't know what we're going to choose. I think staff is saying that they prefer to have 10. I don't know that the council is limited to 10, particularly. As you know, we can set the priorities that we want to. And I'm also not thinking that it's 2 each. I'm thinking that the council is going to collectively decide how they want to prioritize or what they want to use for their goals. But I'm just trying to categorize it for our discussion so that you can raise the item that is a priority for you when we get to that particular category. And then if there's something that hasn't been brought up that somebody has a question about or something, we can discuss that category or what's in it, or something that's already on our list, whether we want to continue it, whether we want to take it out. So it's a little cumbersome. It's hard to figure out quite how to organize it without foreclosing ideas, which I certainly don't want to do. So, but I do want to start with us just kind of asking questions or follow-ups, if we have any, given what we had in the public comment. And I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand, but I am going to ask Mr. White, just because we had a lot of comment on it. Mr. White, I understand that you've undertaken a budget review of the police department. Would you describe that and tell us what you're doing, how,
yes,
why?
Because this had been raised in the 2014-16 goal discussion. It wasn't acted on. And then there have been subsequent comments and discussions during the course of the last several months I thought it was important for the manager's office using the finance department and Jennifer Callaway as the lead staff person to do our review of this. I pretty much have anticipated that some would say, well, you're not a consulting firm. Actually, I happen to have worked for management partners, so I'm not too intimidated by the notion of consulting firms. We are looking at, we have a methodology where we're looking at the cost and quality of services, the levels of service, comparative cost between the town and some of the more common contract agencies and the town and some of the other agencies that have city services. We will pose alternatives and questions in the report, and my intention is to have that completed so that the council can have that as at least a backdrop for discussion probably by the end of next week or the beginning of the following week.
Thank you. Councilman Rennie, did you have?
I was going to go ahead and make comments on the first section. I thought that was
Okay. I was going to also suggest to members of the council that as we do the sections, that we'll just kind of, if you'd raise your hand if you have comments, if everyone does have a comment under that section, we'll just kind of go down the road like we do for council matters, and I'll do it one way the first time, another way the second time. And also, as Ms. Pravetti or some member of the staff, if there would be a way of keeping track of what we are suggesting or prioritizing. So if by chance we end up with 10, we could know it and have it shown to us in some fashion so that we can organize what we're doing going forward. So starting with community character, and I'm going to just read the description for the record and for people in the audience. Preserve and enhance the appearance, character, and environmental quality of the community. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So I'd like to comment on two. I'd say, first of all, address the cut-through traffic is, I would say, my number one on the entire list of everything we can do, because I think that, you know, a significant impact there will have a significant impact in our, to our community. But my guess is everybody agrees on that. So I really want to focus comments on one of the ones that I suggested and do a plug for it. It's a little past the middle of the way down, called Evaluate and Make Necessary Changes to Town Policies to Encourage Mom and Pop Businesses to Evaluate Their Business Plans / Models. I think that was actually staff's interpretation of my description. And so let me just add to that a little bit. You know, what I'm thinking of is, you know, evaluate where we have, you know, a few things, but evaluate where we have bureaucracy and red tape that costs our businesses money. I agree with cost recovery generally, but, you know, can we find ways to streamline our processes so that the costs are lower and we need to recover less from our small businesses? You know, I also say look from the small business perspective where the town costs them money or inhibits their revenue, and evaluate if we can change it. For example, the proposed music policy until 10 that's being thought about could be an example of helping a business model. For example, adding parking or parking efficiency might be another way to help our small businesses in town. So what I'm really suggesting here is staff maybe do surveys, other things, collect information from the businesses themselves to figure out how can we help their business models be more successful, either cost reduction or like I say, not inhibit their business models. Thank you.
Okay. Perhaps now I'm already seeing that my suggested process is not going to work. I think we ought to have a discussion with the council, given Mr. Rennie has put forward some things. I think they actually go across the table. So I'm going to invite council people, and I'm not asking you now for a motion or decision on what he suggested so much as questions or comments or something that says basically I agree, I don't agree, but I have a priority that mirrors it, doesn't, is what, hopefully that would be helpful, I don't know. So does anyone have a comment regarding Councilman Rennie's suggestions they want to share? Councilman Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I think, of course, the idea has merit, but there are many ideas, and I think if we're going to get through this in a timely fashion,
all right.
Looking at the list, I don't know if we should all say, okay, we all agree with Mr. Rennie, we vote yes to support, and that goes on to the goals list, or we think that can wait till next time.
Okay, so I'll call on the Vice Mayor. So Ms. Pravetti, are you recording this as, okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have been, in choosing my priorities, I tried to select those or define them as narrowly as possible so they could be something that could be done, hopefully. And I agree that the cut-through traffic is going to be something that's done by definition. With regard to smoking restrictions, it would be a priority for me that we implement the decision of the Youth Commission. And with regard to the sign ordinance, we already have a sign ordinance. We've had a lot of criticisms, or I should say complaints, by the community that we're not enforcing them, and so enforce our sign ordinances.
So I take it, Vice Mayor, that you have basically covered the bullet points that are your priorities under community character, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to keep going down the line, and we'll just do it back. And Ms. Brady, then I'm going to ask you basically for what's been mentioned, and then hopefully we can narrow our focus when we get to the end. So I'll just go with my community character. My main thing was having gone through the housing element. We had a lot of discussion about our affordable housing overlay zones. What we wanted to do with it was our affordable housing ordinance zone ordinance going to work going forward. How is it different than our specific plan that's now been adopted for the North 40? Should our affordable housing overlay zone design guidelines be converted to a multifamily residential in case the town wanted to repeal the AHOZ? The AHOZ has a lot of good things about it. During the housing element discussion, we got information about how it may not be exactly what we had envisioned going forward with by right development rights, and that we also learned from the state of California that the percentage breakdowns of affordable housing that we have in those ordinances may not be accepted by the state and may jeopardize our ability to get certified housing elements in the future. So that would be a priority of mine. Just commenting on Councilman Rennie, I think that many of your suggestions go, what I'm going to say, across the board. So the cut-through traffic I see basically as traffic. So I'm kind of putting my ideas or priorities into more a broader type of category. So I don't know where it is. I'll come up with it when it's somewhere that I can look at. But TDM plans, there's a proposal for TDM, transit demand management plan for schools. My priority would be for all new development and schools. We should have a traffic demand management program. We should look at high school parking and use of cars. We should look at smart lights for signal timing and synchronization, green bike lanes and shuttle. Councilman Rennie was mentioning parking in the downtown. One of the suggestions was to revamp our parking ordinance to allow for different models of parking, including valet parking, including charging for parking when it's appropriate in different lots. Currently, we prohibit any business from charging more than the town does for parking. The town charges nothing. So if I wanted to put a valet service in my business, I can't do that without violating the code. That doesn't seem like a good solution for trying to figure out our traffic management and our parking in the downtown and throughout the town. And also to allow, revamping our ordinance to allow for shared use of lots, to basically maximize our parking availability in our downtown. And also going forward with the ad hoc committee's suggestion of public-private parking structure. So my basic thing on the community character was AHOZ, but since Councilman Rennie had talked about some of these things, I didn't really know where to put it in. I'll mention it again when we get to it. And Vice Mayor, you have your hand up.
Yes, question, and that's what was confusing to me. And I get back to the process. As I understood it, we were going to zero in under the heading, i.e. community character. So but what I understand is that you went off in a broader way because of the breadth of Mr. Rennie's suggestion.
I did do that. I went off in a broader way.
You did
but
go
I
off.
can certainly stick to the bullets. My bullets on community character are consider repeal revision of AHOZ, consider converting AHOZ design guideline to multifamily residential. Mr. Rennie's bullet on evaluate and make necessary changes to town policies is confusing to me. I'm going to interpret that as deregulate the downtown, consider changing our formula retail ordinance, define specialty retail in a way that makes sense, define hybrid businesses. Those would be the cut through traffic I think of as an infrastructure issue, so I would not make that a priority under community character. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Near and dear to my heart is the smoking ordinances. Anything we can do to improve our grade on our annual smoking report card has been a pet peeve of mine. When we get the D every year and then we got to scramble to get it up to a B. And a couple ways that are always recommended in the correspondence are consider tobacco retailer permitting. I know that we have these new devices called vaping or whatever, perhaps some kind of regulations on those retailers if they could be coming to town. Smoking restrictions in our outdoor dining areas and our sidewalks downtown, and potentially multifamily housing. So those were things, if I get to make suggestions to the youth committee and perhaps Dr. Weissman, who may be working with them, those would be the points on smoking. I suggested we revise policies on below market price units. A couple things. I want to make sure teachers get the opportunity to buy these. And I'm not sure if they've always been handled as such in the past. But I would like to put an extreme preference on our educators to get into these BMP units. And as well as we have a policy where it's held by the owner, and then if they resell it, they have to resell it to the BMP program. But I think if they hold it for a number of years, I think other communities do this, such as 10 years, they could sell it at a market rate. And the reason I'm suggesting this is because if they're going to commit to Los Gatos to 10 years and they enter as an individual family that is a BMP, family in need of housing, low-cost housing, by forcing them to sell it back into the BMP, you're kind of taking away their opportunity for financial gain in a normal market condition, in a real estate market condition. So it's kind of cheating them out of the wealth of appreciation. I don't know if everybody shares that point of view, but I know that's done in other communities. And if they would have went to the normal market and bought a house and stretched and scrimped and saved and got that, and had the normal market appreciation, they might come out ahead wealth-wise. So the object is not to keep it, in my opinion, them as kind of renters that have to sell back into the program, but more or less if you do commit to a period of time, 10 years, one time only, you can't do it every 10 years and get a new one, that you would get the opportunity to participate in selling that house at a market rate. And the only reason I'm suggesting this at this time as well is I know we have a lot of these properties coming online in the future. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for people on the list, but I would not like to see individuals potentially cheated out of the American dream of home equity and wealth. Last but not least, I think I'm going to just mention the news rack ordinance. I'd like to see that go town-wide. As I drive through town, I see these things on our sidewalks on the boulevard, and we're going to be putting in the North 40. I want all of our sidewalks to be passable for everybody who may have disabilities or bicycles or skateboards or whatever, and not have too many news racks. We did it downtown. It's been a great success. It's aesthetic, but it's also practicality. So those are my three in community character.
Okay, Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay, under community character, if we're looking simply at the bullets, I would agree that address cut-through traffic was highest as my priority, but I actually lumped that in just traffic and improving traffic throughout our town, and we could have that larger discussion when we talk about infrastructure. Smoking restrictions is definitely high on my list. I would like to utilize the Youth Commission. It was very exciting and gratifying to see their excitement at how successful their vaping ordinance was, and I'd like to continue that momentum and have them really take on something substantial that they can own. The next priority on my list was continuing our efforts on drought regulations and water ordinances. To that end, there are specific measures within our sustainability plan. I understand that there's 97 that haven't been implemented, but there are only 6 that are specific to water that I think tie in very nicely to the water drought regulations that we can package together. My concern is the reason why I think we need to make this a priority sooner rather than later is we know of lots of impending development coming our way, and the sooner we can actually have clear policies on what we expect from that development, I think the cleaner the application process will fall through, and there'd be a clear understanding from these applicants, whether it's the North 40 or all the upcoming affordable housing, what we expect and anticipate from future development.
Thank you. Ms. Pravetti, now I'm going to ask you to summarize what you heard from us, and hopefully, I was hoping that maybe we could somehow put it up on the board, and I was also hoping that perhaps we could just take a straw poll at this point to see what we want to further discuss when we get to the end, so that things may drop out of this category or may not, or may go forward. So can you kind of go through your list and remind us what are the items that you've heard from multiple or one of us, and we can then raise our hands whether we want to support further discussion on that or not.
Yes, if it would be helpful to the council, what I'll do is I'll read off the items, and then I'll ask Christina to just simply put a check mark at that bullet, so that way you know which ones are still in play for community character. So the second bullet pertaining to smoking restrictions. The third.
Oh, I'm actually going to ask you, let's all raise our hands, and then if we raise our hands and agree that we want to go forward with it with the majority, then put a check by it.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so all want to go forward with the further discussion of smoking restrictions? Okay, it gets a check.
Okay. Then the next one would be the repeal or revision of the AHAS ordinance. We had 2. And are we looking for a majority, or are we?
I think we're looking for,
just any?
well, or you can just put a number down, put 2.
We can put
and then
2.
we'll see what we get that's got, a definite majority. We'll get a check.
Okay. Then the next would be converting AHA's design guidelines to multifamily. So 1. And then the sign ordinance in terms of both education and enforcement. 1. Revise the policies on below market price units. 1. Evaluate and make necessary changes to policies to encourage our businesses.
To the extent I understand that to be deregulation, yes.
Okay. Expand our news rack ordinance.
2 on that.
2 on that one, sorry. Yes. News rack ordinance. We have 1. The water and drought regulations. 3, 4 on drought, and then cut through traffic. 4.
Thank you. I think that'll work for us, hopefully.
Okay.
So let's move on to the next. Before we go on with that, we'll see how much we get as we go forward, and we'll come back to it. So our next main category is good governance. We've got 4 bullets. And I'll start with Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay. Top priority for me is increased use of social media to better communicate with our residents. I think there is, I see good governance as actually, there are lots of things that we need to do better to better communicate with our residents, better provide information, be transparent. And to that end, use of social media, in my mind, is one effective way to start doing that. And the next priority I'd like to place is actually one of the tasks we discussed earlier, which is digitization of essential town records. And I understand that the departments have already looked at what specific resources are necessary there. My concern is that when we don't have resolutions, minutes, and documents easily accessible to our public, a lot of information has gotten lost. We have a relatively new executive team, relatively new council, and I think that the more information, especially when it pertains to resolutions that create policy, is out there for our residents to actually see and understand, the better the trust they have in us, and actually the better communication we have in future decisions, as there's a better understanding of some of the complexity behind some of our decisions.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. So in good governance, council term limits, I brought this back in the past, and I felt as though we're one of the last municipalities in all the valley that doesn't have it. And I think as a council body, we should enact it upon ourselves and not necessarily wait for the public to bring forward an initiative. It goes back, in my opinion, to transparency. It's not directed at council members who have served a long time or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to perhaps this getting some support tonight. Developing the police department conflict of interest policies. Again, this is an idea. I don't know if this is something that HR could just take care of and draft for us. But the idea is to maintain the integrity and the image of the Los Gatos Police Department. And I think all outside employment, there could be issues surrounding it, and I think we should focus in on that. So,
You may ask a question.
This is more on staff. Are there conflict of interest policies for just all staff, whether it's executive team or public works or the police?
Well, one of the things that we had discussed with HR some time ago was to take a look at outside employment policies for all departments. I know that the police department does have an outside employment policy that was adopted in 2014. And so we're looking at all of those things because we want to ensure that when it comes to any employee's employment, that we don't have conflicts with jobs within the town. So that has been already asked for with HR.
I didn't have as one of my top 3 priorities anything under good governance, but I agree with Councilwoman Sayoc that we need to figure out how to maximize our use of social media to get information to our residents. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under my limited priorities, I didn't have any under this section either, although I agree with regard to digitizing.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I should just say sort of what everybody else is saying, that there's ideas in here that are good, but I'm not going to mention them or possibly not even vote for them because there's far more work than we could do. So if I don't vote for or mention an idea, I don't want people to think I'm opposed to it. I'm just trying to get to the ones that are most important. So again, I'll echo what I've already heard as I agree with Councilwoman Sayoc about the social media on these, and that's the only one I'll mention.
Thank you. So again, then, with the assistance of Ms. Bravetti and Ms. Gilmore, let's see what support there is for further discussion. You've got 3 up there, but I'm not sure that we voted on to see whether 3 for social media or not. So
We
Council?
haven't yet. We've just heard 3 people mention
Yeah,
it.
so those who want further discussion on social media?
4.
Okay. Term limits?
1. And conflict policies. We're actually tentatively getting the townwide conflict policies to the policy committee next week, if we can. So that's our goal, and so that already is in progress. But if it is a priority, we're happy to acknowledge it as well.
Okay. Does anyone want to vote for that one?
Well, I'd like to see it go to the policy committee next week.
Right, but which is different than setting a strategic goal. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. It sounds like, and I expect this will happen later in the evening as well, but staff has already started in this direction, so it's redundant. So the only reason I'm not voting on my own suggestion is because it's already underway.
Understood. And finally, board and commission retreats.
And then we added the digitizing of town records.
Okay, and all who want digitized town records?
That's 4, okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to fiscal stability and we'll change our order just because. Vice Mayor Spector.
You're supposed to start at one end or the other.
I know I said that, but since I got slapped down for going off process on the other, I can choose my going off on this one.
You may. There was one in here that sounded, one of my priorities is the funding for the Almond Grove. And there was one item in here that talked about ongoing funding for street maintenance. That seems important, but to me, Almond Grove is more specific, and so I don't think it fits within this category. But if it does, then I'm going to put Almond Grove in there.
Okay. I think that actually does appear specifically somewhere else, correct, staff?
Well, Almond Grove is going to be back to the council on September 15th with financing alternatives as well as the scheduling out of the Almond Grove project.
But it's also on page 3 under quality public infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Then I'll wait till page 3.
Okay. Under fiscal stability, I did not establish any of the bulleted items as one of my major priorities. However, I am interested in the last bullet, which is develop an economic vitality strategic plan to evaluate opportunities, allow the town to enhance vibrancy and attract residents, visitors, shop, dine, and stay. And again, I put that under the category of what I'm going to call my advocacy for a goal to deregulate the downtown through various means. The other thing that I think that we've talked about that might fit into this category, but it's not a bullet, is the hiring of a grant writer that might come under conduct review of annual community grant process. I think it would benefit the town to get a grant writer, whether we hire one, whether we designate someone in the staff and train them to do that. I would like to see us do that. And the tickler that was mentioned for town contracts, to make sure that we know when they are coming up for review, when they need to be negotiated, and what we should be doing on those. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I will take bullets 2 through 5 and lump them into one bucket. We've had, and by the way, I want to preface my comments by saying all my ideas come from the public. These aren't things that I'm burning to do on my own or ego or any of that stuff. These are things that come to me over years directly from the public. And when you think of all of the revenues that the town has to work with and all the expenses the town has to work with, I think lumping all these into one complete assessment of the town's finances, as was suggested by management partners, to discover efficiencies. I'm not going to single out any particular department. Last year, the council, as part of our strategic goals, there was specific direction, a drill down of the police department budget, and Chief Seaman came in and delivered the weekend crime report, and he didn't really get to the details. And I think the reason why these issues seem to linger is because there is interest in the community, strong interest in some of these items, things like unfunded pension liabilities. Well, what does that mean? What are we on the hook for? How do we resolve this? How do we be proactive about it? Having a consultant come in, a non-biased third party, I think would be an important step. I do respect the interim town manager, Les White's, trying to tackle it internally. But internally in the past, it just hasn't worked. And I'm looking to discover more than what we can discover on our own. There may be ideas out there, such as, I wrote these down because I knew I'd forget. And maybe I'll find them and maybe I won't. But what the goal is to achieve greater efficiencies and perhaps greater potential revenue streams, to bring more revenue into the town, to run a more efficient ship, to do a financial assessment, and to have a third party make some strong recommendations, practices that were discovered through years of experience, shared practices among other communities, things that will bring well, I can't find it. Things that will bring more fiscal stability to our town in the long run, and not just in terms of, I know the goal is 2014 to 2016. We balance our budget 1 year at a time, and we're only required to balance our budget. And this year we had a revenue surplus, which was kind of nice, but the requirement just to balance your budget to me is like a C student. I want Los Gatos to be A+ fiscally. I want us to go beyond balancing our budget and return the extra funds or the extra savings or the extra efficiencies we discover to our shareholders, to our community. Bring them more amenities, bring them more service. There's been issue raised with the sheriff and the Los Gatos police. It's a very simplistic equation. Yes, one costs more than the other. I'd like to see a true assessment of the community needs, a true assessment of the community's finances from a third party. And I think if we spend a little bit of money and do a study, I don't know how much it is, but every time that we've hired a consultant in the past, we've gotten way more back for our dollar. And I think this is warranted at this point in time. And it takes the pressure off of our staff to have to worry about it, and it takes the awkwardness off of our staff if they're feeling pressures from members of the community, which are very outspoken sometimes about what they want, special interest groups and such and such. So I think it's reasonable. I hope to find support on the council for this, because I think this is, like, out of all the goals tonight, the number one most important thing. We have a new town manager coming in, and I want that town manager to have access to information and be able to go to council with information and say, hey, look, we can do this, or we shouldn't do this. And let the council decide what's best for the community and try to make Los Gatos fiscally strong way into the future, in terms of, longer than just 2 years. Sorry I rambled on so long here. That's my 2 cents.
It's quite all right. Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay. For fiscal stability, I think a fiscal assessment of all our services within the government is always a good thing, and it should be happening on a regular basis and shouldn't be a specific task that we are going to identify over the next 2 years. Actually, I was just thinking that as our interim town manager's tenure is coming to end, perhaps this is something that he may be able to give us more information about. He's been in this role for many months now and has learned the nuances, and you've certainly made several observations. And this is an area where I think your opinions and suggestions would be well welcome and I think would be quite helpful. In terms of priority, my top priority in fiscal stability was developing an economic vitality strategic plan. I think of downtown immediately when I think of creating more vitality, but I certainly want to extend that vitality plan to all our commercial areas and really looking at what are the things that what are the services that we're lacking and what is it that our residents desire when they leave town and go to other places.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's lots of good ideas in this section, but I've got a lot more stars in the next two sections. So I'm just going to mention that explore and present funding mechanisms to provide ongoing funding for street maintenance, which it says is in progress, but I want to make sure we don't lose focus on that because, you know, we all remember, you know, how hard we've been working to try to find the funds to get the Almond Grove done, and we've actually been stealing from our road maintenance fund, so the roads are going to get worse. We need $2 million a year just to keep our roads from getting worse, and we haven't been budgeting that, I think, ever. So I want to keep our focus on this one particular item to keep this in mind.
Okay, thank you. So let's do our bullet by bullet straw poll and see what we are interested in pursuing further.
Okay. I don't know if you want to recognize.
Councilman, I'm sorry. Thank you. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So just for the record, I wanted to combine the 4 bullets that I talked about into one bullet, and that bullet would be a third-party review of the town's economic situation.
Okay, you're saying 4 bullets. I'm seeing 3 that are a fiscal assessment.
Well, it begins with the bullet, conduct a library fiscal assessment, ends with the bullet, review and consider major revenue sources.
Okay. All right. With that in mind, Ms. Pravetti, I'll let you tell us.
Okay, if it's amenable to the full council, then we can combine bullets 2 through 5 regarding a third-party assessment of the town's fiscal status.
So raise your hand if you want further discussion on that one. I don't see Councilman Leonardis.
So we have 1.
Okay.
And then we have explore and present funding mechanisms to provide ongoing funding for street maintenance. 3, 4. And then the community grant process, including the addition of a grant writer on staff. 2. Oh, 3, sorry. Develop an economic vitality strategic plan. 3. And the town contracts tickler concept was added. 2. 3. Oh, thank you. So we have 3 on contracts.
Okay. So we're going to move to infrastructure has been divided into 2 categories, downtown and townwide. So I'm just going to stick with what we've got. Start with Councilman Leonardis this time.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Previously, in our strategic goals, we addressed the issue of traffic and parking around schools, and we allocated $100,000 for that for studies in order to improve the flow of traffic and the safety. And I see elements in this category: work with the high school to reduce students' use of cars, enhance safe routes to schools. We've addressed green bike lanes around some of the schools, but I guess I would still be interested in that $100,000 in performing those studies in and around the schools with the cooperation of the schools. And I don't think that means financial cooperation, just them saying, okay, come and do it, and we'll give you our information about our student populations and traffic and such. So again, lumping many categories into how do we spend this $100,000 to improve traffic in and around the schools.
Okay, when I look at these bullets under townwide infrastructure, I essentially see traffic. I mentioned them before, but the one that I think that is new is transportation demand plans for all schools. As I said earlier, my suggestion or my hope would that we would require or establish transportation demand plans for all, I guess I would say, new development of a certain level. I mean, if I put a second story on my house, I don't think I need a TDM, but I might, depending on how many cars I have. But I'm thinking of it as new development, which perhaps to the extent that requires a traffic study, maybe. I'm not sure what the threshold would be, but I think that we should be exploring transportation demand plans as a traffic management tool. As I said earlier, I do think we need to work with the high school as much as we can to reduce use of cars. I know we're trying to do that with safe routes to school. But for example, where the town could have an impact, we have designated parking in front of the high school that's limited to high school cars for a certain amount of time. I've tried to figure out why we have that, how it came about. It doesn't seem like a good use of parking. It seems like it encourages students to drive. It might be better to designate that as a drop-off point if people are still going to drive or something, but designating the parking is a bad idea. So just a way of saying we need to address the high school traffic issue, and that may be parking, that may be use of cars. The smart signal light technology and timing, I think, is really important. Mr. Morley mentioned earlier playing, quote unquote, with the signal timing for the weekend traffic. It also matters when you come through town at certain times of the day when University and North Santa Cruz signals on Highway 9 are not synchronized. People can't get through the intersections, and we create a giant backup, and it's been a continuing issue. We put in some green bike lanes that are very well received, and so I would like to see us continue with that program and hopefully find some funding to expand it. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This section, public infrastructure, is, probably if I were going to characterize one overall priority, this would be it. But I was trying to reduce the number of items. So with that in mind, I didn't choose them all. One that was a priority was the work with the high school to reduce the students' use of cars. I am very much aware that we can't make the high school do anything, but to work with them to reduce the number of parking permits that they distribute, given that they distribute more permits than they have parking spaces. Definitely to the extent that it is the town that identifies how long you can park in front of the high school, we can certainly change that. Another thing that I've always had in my mind, and I don't know if it'll happen in the next year, so it probably shouldn't be a priority, but because it's always been important to me, it's the private shuttles to make regular and practical circuits of the town.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I look at all these, and most of them mean traffic to me also, which is probably the biggest effect on our quality of life in Los Gatos. I ended up putting a star on all but 2 of these because, I think traffic's the big deal. But I did put some double stars on, and I'll just tell you the double stars. I think that the 2 worst traffic times are our cut through, which we've already talked about, and then the people getting to schools, and particularly around the high school. So you can imagine I put double stars on all those. The transportation demand plans for the schools, I like that. If I define that the same way you do, I think I like that. Again, work with the high school to reduce students' use of cars. I put that high on the priority list. And I also think I've double starred to get private shuttles to make regular and practical circuits of the town. I don't think anybody else mentioned that one, but I think that will help a lot also.
Okay, thank you. Any other goals or questions or comments before we do our straw poll? Okay, Ms. Bravetti and Ms. Gilmore.
Okay, transportation demand management plans.
And again, after you hear it called out, raise your hand if you want further discussion.
That's 5. Okay. Work with the high school to reduce student use of cars. 5. Thank you. Explore smart signal light technology. 2. Add more green bike lanes. 1, 2, 3. Get private shuttles to make regular and practical circuits. 3. 4. Thank you. And then we already have the strategic goal to do the study around the schools. That's in progress. But we do appreciate the clarification that we don't need financial cooperation, so that was helpful. I don't know if we need to, I don't think we need to add that. It's already underway.
Okay.
Now downtown.
So quality public infrastructure downtown, we'll start in the middle, we'll go to my left and come back and start at the end. Come back. My highest priorities well, a lot of these are interesting. I categorize these into downtown. So one of the things was close downtown streets 4 times per year. I think that's too limited. So if I lump one of my priorities here with something that I think may be happening and say, well, we need to explore our options of special events and what we do with our downtown. How do we close streets? When do we close streets? Why do we close streets? How do we make it fun and exciting for people to come downtown? If we close North Santa Cruz and Plaza Park, do we also close the southbound freeway exit to Highway 17, thus affecting cut-through traffic? So I don't know how that gets categorized, but if I look at just the bullets, my highest priority on just the bullets would be review options to enhance parking in the downtown. I consider that to be very broad. There's parking garages that are mentioned under other bullets, but I consider options to enhance parking to encompass a lot of things, which may or may not include garages, which may include exploring charging for parking, which may include eliminating parking in some circumstances for parklets, which may include shared use of lots, which may include valet parking, and that's the last bullet. So I actually see review options to enhance parking and the last bullet, revised town code, as being sort of the same. They're essentially parking options, and those would be my highest priorities under that category. So going to my left at the end, Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also have lots of stars in this section. Try to go maybe with the 2-star ones. I did say identify timeline and funding for repaving of the Almond Grove streets. We're sort of in the middle of that. We definitely, that's a big problem, high priority. I also had review options for traffic mitigation through downtown and neighborhoods. I think we've already kind of talked about traffic. That's the same thing again, sort of. I said I also double-starred adding 2 parking garages downtown, but that's also related to explore the parking garage at Main and Linden that we've been working on. So that, I guess, those are sort of together. And then I also like the idea of revising town code with respect to parking with an eye on valet parking. That's certainly something that could help parking, and if our code is making it more difficult, we should explore that.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was another section where I tried to limit because there were so many items that I could have selected. So with that structure, identify a timeline and, well, actually not a timeline, identify funding for repaving of Almond Grove streets, because in my mind, the time is now. Add 2 parking garages downtown. We already have one of these options in process, which is the parking garage at Main and Linden. So I'll limit my priorities to those 3.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'll echo the funding for Almond Grove Street as well as the parking garages downtown. There were several ideas within this grouping, such as the parklet and the downtown festivals, and I actually saw that as specific steps that we could look at if we were to pursue an economic vitality plan for the downtown. These are all things that could just make downtown more lively.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, the repaving of the Almond Grove streets, I think, the timeline with the funding. I suggested redo the downtown streetscape to make downtown more user-friendly and less frantic. The logic behind that is it's looking a little tired. I think we can do a lot down there to bring more outdoor seating, make it more pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly, slow down the traffic, try to eliminate some of the cut-through traffic. I think we really need to look at it as a master plan for our downtown. I know other cities are doing this. Saratoga has come to mind right now. They're going through a public process right now to try to look at their downtown. So I don't know if it's going to have legs, but I suggested it. The street festivals 4 times a year, that was, I support that. And the 2 parking garages, I support that. And I know we've discussed one already.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we take our poll? All right.
Okay, well, all of the bullets in this case were selected, so we could just go straight down the list and vote. So Almond Grove, 5. Parklets.
And I want to echo what Councilwoman Sayoc said, is that I said at the start that I have trouble categorizing these. So if I look at festivals, streetscape, it's deregulation, et cetera, as an economic vitality, then okay, but just, so I'm going to raise my hand with that caveat.
Okay, so we have 3. Let's see, traffic mitigation through downtown in the neighborhoods. This one's already, I mean, I don't know if, where there's a little bit of redundancy.
Is that
with the
cut-through traffic?
With the cut-through traffic, which already is on our list with 4 votes, so.
Well, are we saying that that's cut-through traffic? Review options for traffic mitigation through downtown and neighborhoods. Is that cut-through traffic? Is that another way to describe it?
It's another way of saying cut-through traffic.
Okay.
If the council would like it to be a separate item and be considered more broadly than just beach cut-through traffic, then we can leave it as a separate item.
I think that you heard from all the council that we want to make sure that we're addressing how to mitigate traffic through downtown and the neighborhoods, whether we call that cut-through traffic or have it be a separate category. I'm not sure that that matters.
Okay, so we have 3. Redo the downtown streetscape.
Economic vitality.
Okay, so what we could do is, since economic vitality did so well on the earlier ranking, we can just pull these items that are related so we don't lose the ideas, but nor do we, so that way we can consider it in a more comprehensive way. Okay, so we'll add that one to the economic vitality. Same with the festival concept as part of economic vitality. Parking garages, we have, again, there's opportunities for combination. We've got to add 2 parking garages. Do you want to vote that one as a separate item? So there were 4 on the parking garages. And then enhanced parking in the downtown, which was related to the last one with respect to...
Is that revised town code with respect to parking? Is that what you mean?
Well, again, if we want to combine these together, we can, or we can continue doing them one by one.
All right. let's see what the council thinks about combining them as enhanced parking downtown. Or do people want to keep them as separate? Okay, we're going to combine the last 4 bullets as essentially enhancing parking options downtown. So how many would like to see further discussion on that?
5, okay. So we'll combine those last 4 bullets together.
Okay.
Well, can I just say a word of caution? I know as you go through these, that you're going to go back through and look at priorities on these too, because I look at this and it looks like a horse that Public Works could choke on. You know, it's a big.
Well, if we had horses downtown, it'd be all good, right?
There's a lot of projects within projects that up here, so, okay.
I think that at least what I'm envisioning that we're going to do with this is we're going to come back, we're going to see how many voted for 5, and those are going to be probably the top, and then we're going to proceed down and see if we can winnow it or prioritize it. It was what I was thinking, is that hopefully we can do it that way. Before I get to civic enrichment bullet and public safety bullet, I wanted to just bring up those things that had been suggested by members of the public that we haven't addressed yet, that aren't necessarily in here, and see if anybody has an interest in pursuing them. One was the revision of the hillside fence ordinance. Okay, we've got one. I think we talked about expanding smoking restrictions with the Youth Commission, but I'm not sure we formally voted on that. So did we?
We did.
Did it actually take a vote on it?
Yes,
Okay.
we had 5 votes on
All
that.
right. Grading ordinance?
That's already underway. That's a current
Okay.
strategic goal.
All right. And then what I heard of as a implementation or discussion of annexation, working with the county. 1. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go with, then we only have 2 bullets left, civic enrichment and public safety. Does anyone want to speak to either one of those? Councilman Leonardis?
Regarding the public safety, I explained the position earlier in the evening. Again, I don't know if it'll be an issue going forward, but it seems like it puts the town manager and the police chief in an awkward space according to previous contracts that we've had with the employment of the town manager. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, do we have any support for including that in our discussion going forward? Okay, what about civic enrichment? Does anyone want to pursue that further? Okay. So what I'm going to suggest then is that hopefully somebody's been keeping a tally of those that have got 5 and then on down the line so that we can then further winnow, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There were a couple of my top 7 that weren't on this list as the list is constructed, but they and so the question would be, are we going to have an opportunity to discuss those? And second layer is if they are things that I believe the town would address in any event, i.e. consider sale of properties, would that be something that I should bring forward as my priority or not?
Well, so on those items that didn't make it to the list, I'm assuming that they were bullet points that weren't mentioned by someone? Or they're just not on the list altogether?
They're not on the list altogether.
So that you've come tonight with new things that you want us to consider?
I have come with new things.
All right. Why don't you let us know what the new things that you want us to consider are?
Highway 85, with a combination of the VTA, the initiative, and the lawsuit, and because I think that will be a priority in this coming year. And the other thing that may be a priority in this coming year, and I think is important, is the consideration of sale of town properties.
Okay. I'm going to ask members of staff who might be appropriate, given that we are in the process of just working on some of those things. Are those, I don't know, give us some guidance on how the council can consider those suggestions, given that those things are essentially in progress?
Well, you've mentioned some that are currently programmed for the council to consider, Almond Grove and long-range financing alternatives, particularly for capital improvements, is scheduled for September 15th. What are the other ones that were
Sale of
mentioned?
properties.
Sale of properties, that's going to be closed session discussions again on September 1st and the 15th. So those are scheduled now. I think those are the main ones.
And that is an existing goal.
That's already on your goals sheet.
Do they need to be redesignated? What about Highway 85? Does that need to be specifically designated? We know that we're going to have to discuss it. So given that we know that we're going to have to discuss it, do we have to actually designate it as one of our priority goals?
I don't think so. With the litigation and other matters underway, I think from a staff perspective, we appreciate it coming forward with the acknowledgement that there is work involved.
Right.
So we definitely appreciate it, but I think we were looking for what are the new ideas that we should be pursuing.
So, Vice Mayor, did you have something above and beyond what we're going to be required to be doing, given that explanation that you wanted us to consider?
Yes and no. The no is we do not have to consider them, but the process that has been identified for us on this list includes several items that are in process. And so that's what was confusing. If the list has things that are in process and we're voting for those again, that's fine. But I don't want some things that are not on this list and are in process to be forgotten because they're so important this coming year.
And I think we tried to show what's in process, what might be forthcoming, so that the council can see the overall workload and assess it by the departments a bit. And that's why I made that off-the-cuff comment about PPW, because as it shakes out, there may be a number of priority items there.
Okay. So those were the, I'll just look to the council, raise your hand if you think that the items that were mentioned by the Vice Mayor are something that the staff needs to keep in the forefront of their attention and that we need to make sure they don't get lost on our in-progress goals. Okay, so everyone agrees on those two. You said you had other items you wanted to discuss.
Thank you, but I don't.
Okay. Anything else that somehow did not make it onto, yes, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. There was a speaker who brought forth the idea of unification of Los Gatos as a core value, and it's a very interesting point. As I look at this table, it hasn't changed since I've been here, the columns, and I thought that was a great idea. I don't know if it could become a column or if it could become a concept or a strategic goal. But for what it's worth, I thought that was very well thought out point the speaker brought forward.
Okay, does anyone else on the council want to include that concept among those things that we consider going forward tonight on our discussion?
I would.
Okay, 2, 3, sorry. Okay. Okay, anything else before I ask for the tally? Okay. So I'm going to ask perhaps, Ms. Gilmore, I don't know how good your penmanship is, but maybe you can get a blank piece of paper and just, or somehow, or highlight those things that are going to be the 5. I would just like to have them somehow consolidated so that we can see what they are.
So we may have a
highlighter pen. Yeah, I'm looking for all the 5 so I can see how many we have, so that we know what they are.
One is the smoking, the other is the transportation demand management, Almond Grove, and the parking garages.
Okay, and the parking garages is that the comprehensive parking that at least I was discussing, or is that parking garage as being discussed by the ad hoc committee?
There were the add 2 parking garages downtown. I'm sorry, no, it was the review parking, the options to enhance the parking downtown.
Okay, so that's a comprehensive parking garages, parking options, shared lots, valet, whatever it might be, revising town code. Okay, that has 5 as well?
Yes.
Okay. Did anything else have 5?
Have 5.
I'm just looking. Right, yeah. Okay, high school. Could you make that a little bit bigger, Ms. Gilmore? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, on the grove.
And then it
Okay,
looks,
that was it? Right, that's I'm thinking that is the comprehensive parking review. All right, so we already have 5 items that we've all agreed on. So then I think the question is, how do we prioritize that, or do we need to if we're within our 10? And I'm looking to Mr. White or Ms. Bravetti to tell me that.
I think this is great. If we have these 5, we can work from here and integrate them into our work plans.
Well, actually, let me suggest the following to the council and invite comment how we go forward. So my suggestion is that we've made some kind of motion on the 5 that we've identified that are unanimous, that then staff come back to us with a comprehensive paper that's got what they are that we've identified, the number of votes, and that we can then review and consider and then come back for a brief item on September 1st and discuss how we want to add to that and prioritize.
And Mayor, you're not
Go
finished
ahead.
talking. And in that process, can we have staff make any comments about timing and what would be involved in those projects a little bit so that you know that as you set the priorities?
Well, I did hear, and I'd love to see council people's comments on this. I did hear earlier in the evening people wanting dollar figures to be attached to various projects when they came out of commissions or whatever, but I invite comments. Councilman Rennie.
I think you're going to have to do something with the PPW projects because, if I think we were going to go beyond this 5 to the 4, maybe to the 3, but we need to know when Matt should be saying uncle. So somehow you're going to have to give us a feeling for what he can get done during the year.
Councilwoman Sayak.
And to that end, there were several items that we identified. They didn't get unanimous, but as the department moves forward, if you could see how we can even things out, obviously there's lots in PPW, but I want to make sure that there's ongoing work that all departments are doing that somehow gets recognized as priority work as part of our daily continuous service to our town.
And that is basically what you see in the work plan. That covers those other departments. And the other thing that Matt and I were just talking about is that, this is a 2-year plan, so that does offer time to program some of these. So that discussion next time on priorities within the priorities might be useful if he looks at it and says, well, that can be done in the 2nd year, but it's more critical to the council and maybe a couple of other things move back and something moves up. Anyway, there'd be room for that discussion, I would hope.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given the admonitions that staff gave, that I heard from staff in preparing for this meeting, I really tried to limit my priority objectives, and I would ask the same of staff, because when this comes back to us, we have quite a few 5s. And you might tell us that the 5s are going to take all of your 20% time in the next 2 years. And I'm going to just ask for this council person, and I would assume for all of us, that you need to be straight up with us and tell us what you can and cannot do, because it seems like a lot of work.
And I'd like to add to the Vice Mayor's comments that there may be things that are encompassing things that are, as we discussed, in progress already. So if you can give us an idea of, we're almost done with this, or this is easy. So Dr. Weissman is telling us we can do the smoking thing fairly easily, or I know that the policy committee is working on some of the things we've identified. I know that the ad hoc infrastructure committee is working on some of the things that have been identified tonight. So to the extent that they overlap, or you can tell us kind of where you are along the timeline, I think that would be helpful for us as well. Any other information people want to get back? Councilwoman Sayak.
And again, it's difficult when we're going through this because there are ongoing daily things that are happening. And there were a lot of things that were said today about good governance and transparency. And I just want to make sure that as we do all our activities moving forward, those specific ideas that were discussed tonight just be carried through, increasing communication, making sure our documents are well documented. Those are things that shouldn't necessarily be a 2-year goal and should just be carried throughout our daily service. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or requests for what we get back for our next meeting with respect to the strategic goals? Okay. So I think staff, hopefully you will understand what if I could get just a brief recap so we feel comfortable from Ms. Pravetti or Mr. White about what we're going to get back for our consideration. I think we're going to get back the 5. We're going to get the counts for the other things we did. We're going to get budget attached when we need to. We're going to get told if we are overloading someone and where we are along the timeline, correct, so that we can prioritize? Okay. Councilman Rennie?
We might also suggest they tell us if we're underloading somebody too.
Excellent idea. Okay, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So is it the goal to remove the ones from the table that we've already accomplished and put all the 5s into the table so we have a snapshot moving forward? I mean, we put a lot of time and effort and thought into this, obviously, and regardless of money or whatever, we've kind of arrived at these goals, and regardless of time frame and workload, we've arrived at these goals. So achieving these goals, obviously, I realize there's an element of reality, but as far as adding them to the table and not forgetting them or losing sight of them is important to me. I would even suggest adding all the 3s and 4s to the table and then come back at the next meeting and perhaps put a little 3 or a little 4 in there if the table looks too big. Or last year, as we discussed, we had the next up list. So that would be something I would like to see if possible.
So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear about what my suggestion would be. I wasn't wanting us, and I'm hoping that that was the understanding of other members of the council, to necessarily fill in a table. What I was hoping was that we would get a attachment, much like this attachment 2, that would be telling us, here's the 5 you identified unanimously, here's the votes on others. Then we would work through our prioritization and fill in the table as appropriate. Do other people understand that that's what we were going to get back? Mm-hmm. Okay. And staff understands that? Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Leonardis, is that okay with you? Okay. All right. So with thanks to the staff and for members of the department for being here to answer questions, for members of the community that have given us your valuable input and your time. Hopefully we've made some good progress, so thank you very much, and our meeting is adjourned.